You can disciple a person for a decade and leave them an orphan with a Bible. You can teach them to pray, to fast, to tithe, to serve on the team and lead the group and never miss a Sunday. You can hand them a highlighted Bible and a calendar full of holy commitments. And after 10 years of your best work, you can send them out still believing, deep down, that God is keeping score and they are behind. We do it without meaning to. We measure discipleship by behavior because behavior is the only thing we can count. Did they read? Did they show up? Did they give? Did they serve? Those are good fruits. I am not against any of them. But here is the problem that this whole book exists to name. Every one of those behaviors can grow on a slave. A slave reads the Bible. A slave shows up. A slave serves until he is exhausted. A slave gives until it hurts. From the outside, his life looks like the picture of a mature Christian. From the inside, he is afraid. He is working to stay in good standing with a God he is not sure actually likes him. He has all the behavior and none of the belonging. The devil is not worried about a busy servant. He has seen 1 billion of them. They wear out, they burn out, they quietly drift, and even at their most productive they are easy to manage because their whole engine runs on fear. What terrifies the enemy is a settled son. A son who knows whose he is cannot be threatened with abandonment because he was never hired. He cannot be bribed with reward because he is already an heir. You cannot frighten a man out of a house he knows is his. Picture 2 men carrying the same load across the same field on the same morning. Same sweat, same task, same Bible verse on the wall. One of them is working to earn the house. The other is working because the house is already his, and his father's name is on the deed, and his own name is right under it. You cannot tell them apart by watching their hands. But wait a year. The one earning the house breaks down. He has to. Nobody can carry a house on his back forever. He will quit loudly or quit quietly, and either way he will conclude that the problem was him, that he was never enough, that the father was a hard man after all. The other man is still going, because he was never carrying the house. The house was carrying him. This book is about the difference you cannot see by watching the hands, and it is about how to disciple a person all the way across it. Who this book is for? This is a field manual for disciple makers. If you are a pastor, a mentor, a small group leader, a campus worker, a parent raising children in the faith, a spiritual mother or father to anyone younger in the Lord, this was written for you. Anyone responsible for forming another human being is responsible for what kind of person walks out the other end. You can produce servants on accident. Sons take aim. This book gives you the aim. It is not a memoir. I am not going to spend 300 pages telling you my story. I am going to hand you a method, a vocabulary, and a set of moves you can make with a real person sitting across a real table. Use it on Tuesday. There is a second reader, and you may be them. You have served for years. You are tired in a way that rest does not fix. You suspect the gospel is better than the life you are living, and you want out of the treadmill, but you do not have the words for the door. Stay with me. The door has a name, and you already have a key you did not know you were holding. If you want a face for that second reader, Jesus gave us one. In Luke 15, the elder brother stands in the field, refusing to go into his own father's party, and he says the line that exposes the whole problem. These many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed a commandment of yours. Served. Years of flawless behavior, and the word he reaches for is the word of a hired man. He lived in the house and felt like staff. Everything the father owned was already his, and he never once drew on it. That is not a far-off sinner. That is a discipled man. He is the warning hanging over this entire book. The 4 consciousnesses. Underneath every behavior is a consciousness, a default sense of who you are in relation to God. There are 4 of them, and a person can carry one for a lifetime without ever naming it. The whole work of discipleship is moving someone from the first 3 into the 4th. The first is the orphan. His identity is, I am on my own. His motive is survival. He has no father to draw from, so he sources everything himself. His own identity, his own provision, his own approval. His posture toward God is distance, because in his experience nobody is coming. He has nothing guaranteed. Everything must be secured by his own hands, today, or it will not exist tomorrow. The orphan is exhausting to be, because the whole universe rests on his shoulders. The second is the slave. His identity is, I must earn it. His motive is fear. He works to avoid punishment, to stay ahead of wrath, to keep a debt from being called in. His posture toward God is dread dressed up as devotion. He has a master and a debt, and he is never sure the debt is shrinking. When he obeys, it is because he is afraid of what happens if he does not. The slave can look intensely spiritual. He is just running from something. The third is the hireling, the servant for wages. His identity is, I work for pay. His motive is reward. Everything is transactional. I do this, God does that. He is not running from wrath like the slave. He is angling for the bonus. His posture toward God is negotiation. He has a contract, and as long as he performs, he expects to be paid in blessing, breakthrough, and favor. The hireling is the most respectable of the three, which is exactly why he is the hardest to free. His religion works for him until the day it does not, and then the contract he never knew he signed comes due. The fourth is the son. His identity is, I already belong. His motive is love. He does not work to be brought in. He was brought in first, and the work comes out of that. His posture toward God is rest that becomes response. And here is the thing that changes everything. He already has everything. He is an heir. So his work runs the other direction. The orphan, the slave, and the hireling all work toward the Father, trying to get something from him. The Son works from the Father because he already has it. Same field, opposite engine. For you didn't receive the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you received the spirit of adoption, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. Romans 8:15. That is the whole hinge of the new covenant in one verse. Not a better contract, a different relationship. Sonship. Notice the order God works in. Paul does not say behave like a son and God will adopt you. He says you received the spirit of adoption first, and the cry of Abba came out of you because of who you already are. The status comes before the conduct. That order is the engine of everything that follows in this book. Get it backwards, and you will produce slaves who try very hard to earn what was already given. Get it right, and you will produce sons who obey for the strangest of reasons. Not to get in, but because they are already home. This matters for you as a disciple maker, because most of us were trained to start with conduct. We assess behavior, we assign next steps, we measure growth by what changed in the calendar. But you cannot disciple a person into sonship by tightening the screws on his behavior. You will only make a more anxious slave. Sonship is not a higher grade of servanthood. It is a different consciousness entirely, and it has to be revealed before it can be lived. The 5 movements. If those are the 4 consciousnesses, here is how you move a person across them. 5 movements in order that this book will teach you to make. Reveal the Father. Belonging before behavior. Before you correct anyone's conduct, you show them whose they are. The orphan cannot obey his way into a family. He has to be brought in. Close the contract. The finished work ends the slave's earning. The debt is not reduced, it is canceled. It is finished means there is nothing left to pay, which means there is nothing left to fear. Leave the wage behind. This is the hireling's movement, and it is the subtle one. You retire the question, what do I do for God, and replace it with who am I in God. You walk a person off the payroll and into the family. They stop working for wages because they have inherited the estate. Establish the Son. Identity becomes the daily operating system, not a verse memorized once. The Spirit who cries Abba is meant to be the loudest voice in the room when a person wakes up afraid. This is the work of making sonship a reflex. Reproduce the Father. This is the one almost everyone skips, and it is the whole point. A son grows up into a father. A mature son does not just rest in belonging. He turns and makes sons in others. You raise people to carry what you carry, and then you send them. Hear the warning under that last movement, because it is the sharp edge of this whole book. If you raise people to need you forever, you have not made sons. You have made orphans with a leader attached. A ministry full of dependence is not proof of your fathering, it is proof of its failure. Real fathers work themselves out of a job. The aim is not a crowd that cannot function without you. The aim is sons who become fathers and go. The arc, orphan to heir to father. That is the whole movement of the book, and the whole movement of the gospel. You were on your own, now you belong, and everything is yours in Christ. You were an heir who barely knew it, now you walk in it. And the maturity of a son is not staying a son forever in some preserved childhood. It is becoming a father who reproduces what he received. The book is built to take you, and the people you disciple all the way through that arc. Not from bad behavior to good behavior, but from orphan to son to father. That is the difference no one can see by watching the hands. It is the only difference that lasts. We begin where God always begins, and where most discipleship never does. Not with what you must do, but with who already loves you. Turn the page, and we will start at the father's house, with a son who lived there for years and never once felt at home. He showed up every week. He never missed. He led the small group. He carried the chairs. He prayed the long prayers and learned the verses and gave the right answers when you asked him what the gospel was. By every measure you keep, he was a success. He was the one you pointed to. He was the proof that your discipleship worked. And he was a servant. He had been a servant the whole time, and nobody noticed, because a servant and a son do the exact same chores. That is the wound this book is going to open, so let me press on it now and not pretend otherwise. You can disciple a servant for years and never make a son. You can run a faithful, biblical, sacrificial ministry that produces people who do everything right and belong to nothing. They serve the house. They are not at home in it. We have to talk about why this keeps happening. And it starts with what we count. The metric problem. We count behavior because behavior is the only thing we can count. Attendance is countable. Bible reading is countable. Service hours, giving prayer times, verses memorized, sins quit, habits built, all of it lands cleanly on a checklist. So that is what we track. And over time, what we track becomes what we mean by growth. A maturing disciple in practice becomes a person whose numbers are going up. Here is the problem hiding inside that. Every one of those numbers can climb on a slave. Fear is a tremendous motivator. So is the hunger for approval. An orphan with something to prove will outserve your most secure son 9 days out of 10, because the orphan is working for his life and the son is working from his rest. The checklist cannot tell them apart. The checklist was never built to. It measures the chore and is blind to the heart that does it. Worse, the metric quietly rewards the wrong engine. The most driven people in your ministry are often the most frightened. The ones who never say no, who fill every gap, who answer every text at midnight. We hold them up as models, and some of them are simply orphans who have learned that performance buys belonging. We praise the symptom. We platform the wound. And every time we do, we teach the room that this is what a mature disciple looks like, and the slaves take notes. So you can have a person whose every visible metric says thriving, and whose inner life says I am on my own, and I had better keep performing or this all goes away. The dashboard is green. The man is an orphan. And you will not find it by looking at his output, because his output is exactly what you hoped for. The slave and the son do the same chores. This is the hinge of the whole thing, so sit in it. Put a slave and a son side by side in the same household and watch them work. They get up at the same hour. They do the same tasks. From the outside, from the angle a checklist sees, they are identical. You could film a week of each and not tell them apart on the footage. The difference is invisible to a checklist and obvious to the heart. The slave works to keep his place. The son already has his place and works from it. The slave is earning standing. The son is expressing standing. The slave is afraid of what happens if he stops. The son is not afraid, because his belonging was never tied to his performance in the first place. Same hands, same sweat, opposite universe. And here is why this matters for you, the one doing the forming. You cannot disciple the difference into someone by giving them more to do. More chores will not turn a slave into a son. It will only turn a slave into a busier slave. If the engine underneath the activity is fear or earning, then every assignment you hand him, however good, gets metabolized as one more thing he must do to stay safe. You are pouring grace-shaped tasks into a debt-shaped soul, and the soul converts them all back into debt. Jesus said it plainly. A bondservant doesn't live in the house forever. A son remains forever. John 8:35. Read that the way he meant it, because it is more frightening than it sounds in a quiet room. A servant does not abide. His position is conditional. It lasts as long as he is useful, as long as he performs, as long as the arrangement holds. He can give years to that house and never be secure in it for one day, because his standing rests on his service, and service can always fall short tomorrow. The son's place rests on something else entirely, on sonship, which is a thing you are, not a thing you do. The son remains because the son belongs. The servant is always one bad season from the door, and he knows it, and that knowledge is the low constant fear under everything he does. Now ask the question that should keep you up. How many people have you discipled into faithful service and never moved out of the servant's insecurity? How many are abiding in the house, the building, the program, the schedule, without abiding as sons? They are present. They are useful. They are not at rest. And one hard season, one failure, one stretch where the performance dips, and they will quietly conclude they no longer belong, because in their gut they never did. They served their way in. They will fear their way out. The aim was never a better servant. Watch what Jesus does with his closest disciples at the very end, after 3 years of being formed by him. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant doesn't know what his Lord does. But I have called you friends, for everything that I heard from my Father I have made known to you. John 15:15. Notice the direction. He does not promote them from bad servants to good servants. He moves them out of the servant category altogether. And listen to the basis for the change. It is not their performance, it is their access. The servant does not know what his master is doing. He gets orders, not reasons. He executes, he is not let in. A friend is told the Father's business. A friend is brought inside the knowing. Jesus is not rewarding 3 years of good behavior with a nicer title. He is announcing a different kind of relationship, the kind where you are no longer kept at the distance of usefulness. If even Jesus, the perfect master, refuses to leave his disciples in the servant's place, then a discipleship that is content to make good servants is aiming lower than he aims. We keep treating servant as the finish line. He treats it as the thing he came to take people out of. And if friend feels like the ceiling, go higher, because the New Testament does. Hear what the whole rescue was for. For it became him, in bringing many sons to glory, to make the author of their salvation perfect through sufferings. Hebrews 2:10. Read that slowly. The entire purpose clause of the cross, the reason the author of salvation went through what he went through, is stated as bringing many sons to glory. Not staffing a household, not recruiting labor, not filling rotas or building a competent volunteer base. Sons to glory. The suffering of Christ was not aimed at producing a workforce for God. It was aimed at producing a family for God and at carrying that family all the way home. So when our discipleship produces reliable servants and calls it a win, we are not just falling a little short of the ideal. We are at cross purposes with the cross. He bled to make sons. We settle for staff. He suffered to bring many sons to glory. We are proud we got the chairs put away. I am not against the chairs. Sons put away chairs too. The chairs are not the issue. The issue is what is doing the work underneath the chairs, and whether the person carrying them knows in his bones that the house is his Father's house and therefore his, or whether he is still, after all these years, hoping the service is enough to let him stay. This is the elder brother, and we will spend real time with him before this book is done. He was in the field. He worked. He never disobeyed. And when his father threw a party, he stood outside in the dark and said, "All these years I served you, served," his own word, "and you never gave me a goat." Years in the house. Never once knew he was an heir. Everything the father had was already his, and he was out in the cold doing the math on wages. That is not a man who failed at discipleship. That is a man who succeeded at it and stayed a servant the whole time. Sit with how the Father answers him, because it is the whole book in one line. "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours." Always with me. All that is mine is yours. The inheritance was never in question. It was never being withheld. The elder brother had been standing on top of an estate, calling himself a hired hand, refusing the very joy he was free to walk into, not because the father was stingy, but because the son's own consciousness was that of a laborer waiting on a wage. He had the heart of a hireling in the body of an heir. And here is the part that should sober every disciple maker reading this. Nobody had to teach him to sin to get him there. He got there by serving. The slavery grew up right alongside the obedience, hidden inside it, fed by it, and the better he behaved, the deeper it set. Good behavior was not the cure. Good behavior was the camouflage. That is the gap between an active disciple and an actual son. It does not show up on the checklist. It shows up the day the music plays and one of your best people is standing outside in the dark, certain he was never family, doing arithmetic on a goat. Your job is not to get him to work harder. He already works. Your job is to get him in the house, not the building, the family, and to settle him there so deeply that service stops being how he earns his place and becomes how he enjoys it. Because the aim was never a better servant. The aim was a son. And you can tell the two apart if you stop counting the chores and start listening to the heart that does them. The punchline: you can disciple a servant for years and never make a son, because the servant and the son do the same chores, and only the heart knows the difference. Servant or son. If the people you have formed suddenly stopped serving, No roles, no output, no usefulness to offer, would they still be sure they belong? Or would they quietly assume they had just lost their place? The son's confession: I am not staff in my father's house. I am family. My place here was never earned by my service and cannot be lost by my failure. I belong before I do anything, so my work flows out of being home, not toward earning a home I never had. For the disciple maker, this week, take one person you are forming and ask them, out loud and unhurried, do you serve God because you're afraid of what happens if you stop, or because you already know you belong? Then do not fix the answer. Sit in it with them. Let the honest reply surface the orphan or the slave or the hireling underneath, and name it gently together. You cannot move someone out of a place they will not admit they are standing in. Walk into any room of believers, and you will see one congregation. Same songs, same Bibles, same raised hands. But you are not looking at one people. You are looking at four. Under the same roof, in the same row, sometimes inside the same heart, there are four houses. And the disciple maker, who cannot tell them apart, is about to spend years renovating the wrong rooms. Paul gave us the floor plan. Listen to him in Romans. For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, these are children of God. For you didn't receive the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you received the spirit of adoption, by whom we cry, Abba. Father. The Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are children of God, and if children, then heirs, heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ. Romans 8:14-17. Notice the categories he sets in opposition. Bondage, fear, adoption, heirs. He is not describing four kinds of weather. He is describing four ways a soul can stand before God. And he is insisting that only one of them is the truth about you. Before you disciple a single person, you have to learn to read which house they live in. Because all four walk through the same door, sing the same words, and look identical from the parking lot. Let me give each house a face, a voice, and a tell. The orphan. His house has no father in it. His confession is simple: I'm on my own. He may believe God exists, he does not believe God is his. So everything depends on him. He self-sources identity, provision, approval, security. He manufactures all of it, because no one upstairs is sending any down. Listen to how the orphan talks. Nobody's coming to help me. If I don't do it, it won't get done. I can't depend on anyone. He uses the language of self-reliance and calls it maturity. What he fears is abandonment, being left, dropped, forgotten, exposed with nothing to fall back on. So he reaches for control. He hoards. He keeps a private stash of money, of secrets, of contingency plans, because the orphan never stops bracing for the day the bottom falls out. He cannot rest, because rest is a luxury for people who have someone above them. He has no one above him. He is only himself, and he is exhausted. The slave. His house has a master, and the master is angry. His confession is, I must earn it. The slave is not working toward a wage. He is working away from a whip. He carries a debt he can never quite pay down, and the interest is fear. Listen to how the slave talks. I just hope it's enough. I keep messing up. God must be so disappointed. I'm trying to get right with him. Everything is trying to be good enough, trying to make up for it, trying to keep the wrath at bay one more day. What the slave fears is punishment, not failure as a missed opportunity, failure as a coming blow. So he reaches for performance. He overworks. He volunteers for everything and enjoys none of it. He reads his Bible the way a man pays a fine. Underneath the activity is a low, constant dread that the bill is still due, and the father is still owed. The hireling. Here is the one your discipleship program is most likely to produce, and the one you will be most tempted to be proud of. The hireling, the servant for wages, has a better deal than the slave. He is not running from wrath. He is working for pay. His confession is, I work for wages. Listen to how the hireling talks. What do I get out of this? I gave God my whole Saturday. After everything I've done for him, it is the language of the ledger. The hireling keeps accounts. He serves, and he expects the service to convert into blessing, into answered prayer, into a sense of having earned his place. Everything is transactional. He works for God the way an employee works for a company. Real effort, real loyalty, and a quiet, unshakable assumption that he is owed. What the hireling fears is not being paid. Unrewarded effort feels, to him, like betrayal. And here is his tell, the one that gives him away every time: resentment. When the bonus doesn't come, the hireling gets bitter. He has been faithful for years, and something is sour underneath it. You have met this man. Luke met him too. But he answered his father, Behold, these many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed a commandment of yours. But you never gave me a goat, that I might celebrate with my friends. Luke 15:29. That is the elder brother. He never left home. He never disobeyed. By every external measure, he is the success story of the family, the disciple any of us would brag about. And he does not know he is a son. He has lived in his father's house and called himself a servant. I have served you. Years of obedience, and he never once drew from the inheritance that was his the whole time. He stands in the field, outside the party, doing the math on a goat he was never given, while everything the Father owns is already his. Son, you are always with me, and all that I have is yours. He had it all. He felt like he had nothing. That is the hireling's tragedy, and it wears the face of your best volunteer. The son, his confession is the shortest of the four, I already belong. He is not bracing like the orphan, not cowering like the slave, not invoicing like the hireling. He has a father, the debt is paid, and the inheritance is already his. So his work runs the other direction. The first three work toward belonging, to secure it, earn it, or get paid for it. The son works from belonging. He rests first, then responds. His motive is not survival or fear, or reward. His motive is love. Listen to how the son talks. My father, I'm his and that settles it. I get to. Not I have to, I get to. There is no ledger because there is no debt and no wage, there is an inheritance, and you do not earn what you inherit. What does the son fear? Less and less. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. 1 John 4:18, he reaches not for control or for pay, but for his father's face. He obeys, often more than the hireling ever did. But the obedience flows downhill from a settled identity, instead of uphill toward an unsettled one. Now hold all four in your mind, and grasp the thing that makes this whole book necessary. From the outside, all four look the same. All four show up Sunday. All four serve. All four can quote the verse, lead the group, run the ministry. The orphan serves to stay in control. The slave serves to avoid the blow. The hireling serves to collect the wage. The son serves because he is loved. 4 men stack the same chairs after the same service, and 4 entirely different gospels are running underneath. You cannot tell them apart by attendance. You cannot tell them apart by giving, or by service, or by how many years they have been faithful. Ask the elder brother. Behavior is a terrible diagnostic. Behavior is the very thing that hides which house a person lives in. This is why most discipleship misfires. We watch behavior, so we manage behavior. We see a man who is not serving, and we recruit him. We see a man who is serving, and we promote him. But the unserving man might be an exhausted orphan who needs a father, not a sign-up sheet. And the serving man might be an elder brother 3 years from burnout, building a tidy resentment against the God he has never once enjoyed. Add more duty to the slave, and you deepen the bondage. Hand more responsibility to the hireling, and you raise his expected wage and sharpen his coming resentment. You can be busy fixing behavior and never once touch the house the behavior is coming from. And the cruelest part is that it often works for a while. The slave really will show up more if you press him. The hireling really will serve harder if you dangle the right reward. The numbers go up. The volunteer slots fill. Everyone congratulates the disciple maker. But you have not moved anyone an inch towards sonship. You have only made the orphan a more efficient orphan, the slave a more reliable slave, the hireling a more invested hireling. And you have stored up the collapse for later, when the strength runs out or the wage never comes. Good behavior built on the wrong house is a building with no foundation. It stands until the day it doesn't. So here is the disciple maker's first job, and it is not the job you were trained to do. Your first job is not to fix behavior. Your first job is not to correct theology, assign a reading plan, or get them serving. Your first job is to find out which house they live in. Until you know which house they live in, you're disciplining a stranger. You are answering questions. They are not asking and prescribing cures for a disease they do not have. You are handing a budget to a man dying of thirst. The 4 houses are the diagnostic lens for everything that follows in this book, because the entire method is one long move. Out of the first 3 houses and into the 4th. Out of orphan, slave, and hireling. Into son. And you cannot lead anyone out of a house you never bothered to find. So learn to listen. Not to what they do, to how they talk about God when they think they are just making conversation. The orphan will tell you he is on his own. The slave will tell you he is trying to be good enough. The hireling will tell you what he has done and what he is owed. And every now and then, by grace, someone will look at you with no debt and no wage on their face and simply say, "He's my father." That one already knows. Your job with everyone else is to get them home. The punchline: 4 houses sing the same song on Sunday, and your first job is not to fix what a person does, but to find out which house the doing comes from. Servant or son, when God blesses you, do you feel relieved that you finally earned it, or unsurprised, because that is simply what your father does for his children? The son's confession: I am not an orphan, I have a father. I am not a slave, my debt is paid. I am not a hireling, I am an heir. I do not work to belong, I belong, and so I work. All that he has is already mine. For the disciple maker, sit with the person and ask them to finish one sentence out loud, slowly, 3 times. When I think about God, I feel. Don't coach the answer. Write down the exact words they use. Tired is the orphan. Afraid or guilty is the slave. Owed or frustrated is the hireling. Safe or loved is the son. You have just found their house. Now you know which room to start in. There were 2 sons in that story, and we only remember one of them. We tell the parable of the prodigal. We preach the far country, the pig pen, the run of the father down the road. We love the ring and the robe and the fattened calf. And we are right to love it. But Jesus did not end the story at the party. He kept the camera rolling, and it found a second son standing out in the field, refusing to come in. That second son is the one the church keeps producing. He is the reason this book exists. Now his elder son was in the field. As he came near to the house, he heard music and dancing. Luke 15:25. Notice where the elder brother is when grace breaks out. He is working. He is in the field where he has always been, doing the thing he has always done. He is not in a pig pen. He is not in a brothel. He is not far away. He is close and competent and busy, and he is the one outside the party. That should disturb every disciple maker who reads it, because the elder brother is not the man who walked away from the father's training. He is the man who completed it. 2 sons, both orphans. Here is the part we miss when we cast the younger son as the villain and the elder as the victim. Both of these boys are orphans. Not by circumstance, they have a living father standing right there, but by consciousness. Neither of them believes that what is the father's is already theirs. The younger son acts it out by leaving. Give me the share of your property that falls to me, Luke 15:12. That is orphan logic in its purest form. I can't trust you to provide, so give me my cut and I'll source my own life. He treats his father as a bank, cashes out, and runs to a country where nobody knows his name. Survival mode. Self-sourcing. An heir behaving like a man, with nothing guaranteed. The elder son acts it out by staying. He never asks for his share, because he never believes he has one. He just works, year after year after year, in the field, at dawn, in the heat, and not one day of it as a son. He stayed in the house and lived there like a hired hand. One ran. One stayed. Same diagnosis. We have trained ourselves to spot the runner. We watch for the rebellion, the addiction, the moral collapse, the kid who tears off into the far country. We build whole ministries around catching that fall. But the elder brother's orphanhood is invisible, because it wears the costume of faithfulness. Nobody runs an intervention on a man who shows up early. Nobody worries about the one who never disobeys. His estrangement is silent, and it can last for decades, and the people around him will call it godliness right up until the day it curdles into the open contempt we hear in verse 29. The far country is not the only place you can be an orphan. You can be an orphan in the front pew. You can be an orphan in the field that bears your name. You can be an orphan in full-time ministry, with the keys to the building in your pocket and your father's address as your own, and still not know that any of it is yours. The man who never knew he was an heir. Listen to the elder brother when the truth finally erupts out of him. This is the most important sentence in the chapter, so read it slowly. But he answered his father, "Behold, these many years I served you, and I never disobeyed a commandment of yours. But you never gave me a young goat, that I might celebrate with my friends." Luke 15:29. Hear the words he chooses. I served you. Not I lived with you. Not I belong to you. Not I am your son. He uses the language of employment. The Greek word is the word for slaving, for laboring. By his own confession, the elder brother has spent his whole life as staff in his father's house. These many years. This is not a bad week. This is a career. He has logged decades of flawless service. I never disobeyed a commandment. Read his resume. It is spotless. If you scored him on behavior, he would be your model disciple. He is the man you would put in front of the new believers and say, be like him. He shows up. He works hard. He never rebels. He never embarrasses anyone. By every metric we use to measure a disciple, he is a triumph. And he is miserable. You never gave me a young goat. There it is, the hireling exposed. He has been keeping a ledger the whole time. Every year of service was an invoice, and he expected the account to pay out, and it never did, and the resentment has been compounding like interest in the dark. He didn't want the father. He wanted the wages. He wanted a goat for his friends, a payout he could enjoy away from the very father he served. This is the dutiful, resentful, blind man that bad discipleship produces. Not a prodigal. An elder brother. Bad discipleship doesn't make prodigals. It makes elder brothers. We need to be honest about what we are actually doing when we disciple people, because there are two completely different things we could be building, and from the outside, they look almost identical. You can build a son, or you can build an elder brother, and the elder brother is easier, faster, and more impressive on a Sunday. He shows measurable progress. He completes the program. He fills the volunteer slot you could never fill, and he never asks for anything in return, or so you think, because you cannot see the ledger he is keeping in the dark. He is the disciple every leader wants on paper. He makes your discipleship look like it worked. That is precisely why he is so dangerous to reproduce. The system that manufactures him gets rewarded for it. The elder brother is what you get when discipleship is mostly behavior management, when the curriculum is conduct and the metric is compliance, when you teach people the commandments before you ever convince them of the inheritance, when follow Jesus gets quietly translated into perform for the Father. You will produce people who serve hard and never disobey and slowly, secretly, rot, because you train the hands and never reach the identity. Here is the bitter irony at the center of the parable, and at the center of so much of our ministry. The elder son obeyed everything and inherited nothing he hadn't already owned, because no one told him he was a son. It was all his the whole time. Every field he sweated in was his field. Every animal he tended was his herd. The fattened calf he begrudged his brother, that was his calf. He was a millionaire scraping by like a day laborer, and the only thing standing between him and the inheritance was that he did not know who he was. That is a discipleship failure. Somebody had years with that young man and never told him the truth that would have changed everything. Do not be that somebody. The father's reply is the whole gospel to a hireling. Now watch the father. The younger son got a robe and a ring. What does the elder son get? He gets the gospel. He gets the single most important sentence a hireling can ever hear. He said to him, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours." Luke 15:31. Take it apart, because every word is medicine. Son, the first word out of the father's mouth, corrects the elder brother's entire self-understanding. The boy said, "I served." The father says, "Son, you have been calling yourself staff. You were never staff. You have always been my child. You are always with me." The relationship the elder brother was working to earn was never in question. He thought every day in the field was a day of earning the father's nearness. The father says, "You already had me." The whole time, there was no distance to close. There was no wage to win. The nearness he was striving toward was the ground he was already standing on. All that is mine is yours. There is the inheritance, spoken plainly, decades too late through no fault of the father's. The son simply never asked, never believed, never received. It was always his. The goat he was never given was his to take any day of his life. He starved in his own pantry. He worked like a hireling on his own estate. That is what the gospel sounds like when it lands on a man who has been earning. It does not say try harder. It does not say here is your bonus for good service. It says you were a son the entire time, and it was all always yours. This is the sentence so many people in your care have never heard land on them. They are in the field right now. They serve. They do not disobey. And inside, the ledger is filling up, and the resentment is compounding, and they are one disappointment away from standing outside the party with their arms crossed, asking where their goat is. You have the father's words. Go say them. And notice, the parable ends with the question hanging. We never find out whether the elder brother went in. Jesus leaves him in the doorway on purpose, because the elder brother in the story is every dutiful religious man listening, and the ending he gets is the one he chooses. The door is open. The music is playing. The father came out to him too. The only thing keeping him in the field is the lie that he has hired help. Your job is to walk people through that door before the resentment hardens, not by demanding they serve more, by telling them, until it finally lands, that they were sons before they ever lifted a finger. The punchline: the elder son obeyed everything and inherited nothing he hadn't already owned, because no one told him he was a son. Servant or son? When the people you've discipled describe their walk with God, do they say, "I serve him," or "I belong to him"? And which one did your discipleship teach them to say? The son's confession: "I am not staff in my father's house. I am his child. I was never earning his nearness. I have always been with him, and everything that is his is already mine. I stop keeping the ledger. I come into the party." For the disciple maker, sit down with the person you are forming and have them read Luke 15, 29 and 15, 31 aloud in order. Then ask one question: which sentence have you actually been living in? Don't rush past the silence. Let them find themselves in the elder brother before you ever read them the father's reply, and then read it to them, slowly, by name. Nobody sets out to make a servant. You sat down with that new believer because you loved him. You wanted him to know God. You opened your Bible, gave him a reading plan, told him what a follower of Jesus does. You meant grace. And 2 years later, he is anxious, tired, and quietly certain that God is mostly disappointed in him. You did not make him a servant on purpose. You made him a servant with your methods. That is the hardest sentence in this book, so read it again. The damage rarely comes from bad theology preached on Sunday. It comes from good theology, dismantled on Tuesday by how we form people. We confess sons and we manufacture slaves, and the machine that does it is the discipleship method itself. Paul saw the same machine running in Galatia. These were not pagans. They were converts. They had received the Spirit, and someone discipled them straight back into bondage. O foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? Did you receive the Spirit by the works of the law, or by hearing of faith? Are you so foolish? Having begun in the Spirit, are you now completed in the flesh? Galatians 3, 1-3. Having begun in the Spirit, are you now being perfected by the flesh? That is the diagnostic question for every disciple maker. We get the start right. We tell people they are saved by grace. Then we hand them a method of growth that runs entirely on flesh, fear, and effort, and we wonder why they look like the elder brother by year 3. Paul names it again later, and it is even more pointed. But now that you have come to know God, or rather to be known by God, how is it that you turn back again to the weak and miserable elemental principles, to which you desire to be in bondage all over again? Galatians 4, 9. Turn back again. You can disciple a free man back into chains. It happens all the time. It is usually done by sincere, gifted, loving people who would be horrified to hear it called bondage. Notice Paul does not call them rebels. He calls them bewitched. Something was done to them. They did not wake up one morning and choose the law. They were formed into it, week by week, by teachers they trusted. That is the unsettling part. The people who put them back under bondage looked exactly like disciple makers. They had scripture in their hands and zeal in their hearts, and they handed free sons a yoke their fathers could not bear. So let us look in the mirror. Here are the 5 ways we accidentally make servants. Read them as your own house, not someone else's. 1. We lead with behavior before identity. The diagnosis, the first thing out of our mouths, is what to do. Read this. Pray this. Stop that. Show up here. We assume identity will sort itself out once the habits are in place. So we build the house before we pour the foundation, and the whole structure rests on performance. The disciple learns the moves before he ever learns the name. He becomes a son who behaves like a hireling because the only thing he was ever handed was a job description. The fix belonging before behavior. Always establish who he is in Christ before you. Assign a single thing for him to do. Spend the first weeks on the Father, not the to-do list. Let obedience grow out of sonship, never toward it. When you teach a practice, anchor it in identity first. You are a son, and sons talk to their father, so let's pray. Not real Christians pray, so you'd better start. Same action, opposite engine. One flows from belonging. The other tries to buy it. 2. We use fear, guilt, or obligation as fuel. The diagnosis: you should pray more. A real disciple would be in the Word daily. Don't you care about the lost? We reach for guilt because guilt works in the short term. It produces a burst of behavior. But guilt is a slave's fuel. It runs on fear of disappointing, fear of falling behind, fear of not measuring up. You can build a very busy Christian on fear. You cannot build a son. The motor is wrong, and the wrong motor produces the wrong creature. The fix: stop preaching the should. Preach the get to, and let love do the pulling. The spirit who cries Abba does not motivate by threat. When you feel the urge to say you should, ask instead, what has the Father already given that makes this a privilege? Disciple from the inheritance, not toward the deadline. A son prays because he can, not because he'll be in trouble if he doesn't. Fear can move a man for a season, but it always leaves him exhausted and quietly resentful of the very God it pointed him to. Love is the only fuel that does not burn the son alive on the way to obedience. 3. We teach the law as the path to growth. The diagnosis: we get the gospel right at the entrance and then quietly switch to the law for the journey. Saved by grace, sanctified by effort, we hand the new believer a ladder of disciplines and tell him to climb toward a God who is, in fact, already holding him. This is the exact Galatian error: begun in the spirit, perfected in the flesh. The law was never given to grow you up. It was given to show you your need and drive you to Christ. Use it as a growth strategy, and you will produce strivers who never rest, because the law has no finish line. The fix: same gospel for the journey as for the door. Growth comes by beholding, not by striving. We become like the one we look at, so keep pointing the disciple at Christ, not at the mirror of his own performance. Teach the commands of Christ, yes, but as the shape of a life already given, not as the toll to enter it. Abide first. Fruit follows. It always does, and never the other way around. The branch does not strain to produce grapes. It stays joined to the vine, and the fruit is simply what abiding looks like from the outside. Hand your disciple a ladder and you will get a climber, always one rung short. Hand him a vine and you will get a son who bears fruit without forcing a single cluster. 4. We reward performance with approval. The diagnosis: this is the quietest one and the most damaging. We do not say it. We radiate it. We light up when he shows up. We grow warm when his answers are right, cool when he stumbles, distant when he disappears for a month. We become, without meaning to, a small daily picture of a God whose love tracks performance. The disciple learns to read our face the way he expects to read God's, and we have just trained him to be a hireling working for the wage of our approval. The fix: make your warmth unconditional and obvious, especially when he fails. Love him loudest on his worst week. When he confesses sin, lean in, do not pull back. Be the most consistent picture of the Father's face he has ever seen. He should never be able to earn more of you, because there is no more to earn. That is the whole point. You are showing him a father who already ran down the road, while the prodigal was still a long way off. 5. We build dependence. The diagnosis: we feel needed and we like it. So we make ourselves the indispensable hub. He texts us before every decision. He cannot read a passage without asking what it means. He calls us his covering, and we never push him out of the nest because the nest feels good with him in it. We call this discipleship. It is orphan making with a leader attached. An orphan with a strong leader is still an orphan. We have just given him a substitute father he can lose. The goal was never to make him need you. It was to make him know the Father he can never lose. The fix: disciple toward your own redundancy from day one. Aim to be left. Push decisions back to him and the Spirit. Hand him the Bible and teach him to feed himself. Get him reproducing in someone else early, before he feels ready, because reproducing is what turns a son into a father. Measure your success not by how much he needs you, but by how soon he doesn't. A father raises a child to walk out the door. The proof that you discipled him well is that one day he can do without you and run to the Father instead. If he still cannot move without your blessing, you have not finished the work. You have only flattered yourself. Look at those 5 again and notice what they share. Not one of them is a doctrinal error. Every one is a method error. You can believe in grace with your whole heart and still run all 5. That is precisely how the elder brother was made. Nobody preached him a false gospel. He simply served in the field for years, and no one ever told him the inheritance was already his. Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. Luke 15:31. He had it the whole time. The Father's presence, the Father's estate, the Father's heart. And he worked like a slave inside his own inheritance, angry and unthanked, because the discipleship he received taught him to earn what he already owned. That is the servant we accidentally make. Busy, faithful, resentful, standing in the field with a fortune in his name, certain he is one mistake away from losing it all. You did not mean to. None of us did. But the method is the message, and a son cannot be formed by the means of a slave. You cannot fear a person into freedom. You cannot guilt a person into rest. You cannot perform and approve a person into knowing he is loved without conditions. The means must match the end, or the end never arrives. So we stop blaming the disciple's heart and start examining our hands. The next 5 movements of this book are the repair, reveal the father, close the contract, leave the wage behind, establish the son, reproduce the father. Each one is a deliberate undoing of the 5 mistakes you just read. But none of it works until you own the mirror first. Change the method, and you change what walks out the door. The punchline: we don't make servants on purpose, we make them with our methods. Servant or son. When the person you're disciplining fails, does he run toward you or away from you? And what has your face taught him to expect from the Father's? The son's confession: I am not earning what is already mine. My Father's presence is given, his estate is mine, his face is toward me. I serve from the inheritance, never toward it. I work because I belong, not to belong. For the disciple maker, before your next meeting, write down the first 3 things you plan to ask the person to do. Then put them away. Open instead with one truth about who he already is in Christ, and do not assign a single task until he can say his identity back to you in his own words. Let belonging set the agenda for the whole conversation. A man can live in his father's house and still flinch every time the door opens. He sleeps under the roof. He eats at the table. But somewhere in him a ledger is open, and the ink is red. He believes there is still a balance owing. That man will never rest. He will serve hard and sleep light. He will read the love of the house as a probation he has not yet passed. This chapter is about closing that ledger, not reducing it, closing it, because the foundation a son stands on is not I am improving. It is finished. Hear the word your disciple needs before he needs any other word. When Jesus therefore had received the vinegar, he said, It is finished. He bowed his head and gave up his spirit. John 19:30. One word in the Greek, tirelessly. English needs 3 to carry it. It is finished. But here is what you must teach the people you are forming. That word was not first a religious word. It was a marketplace word, a business word. Archaeologists have found it stamped across the bottom of receipts and tax documents from the ancient world. Tirelessly, paid in full. It was what you wrote across a bond when the last coin was handed over. It was what a freed slave's papers said. The debt is not being managed. It is not on a payment plan. It is satisfied. There is nothing further to render. That is the word the Son of God chose to die on. Not I have done my best. Not I have made a good start. Not now it is your turn. He said, paid in full. And then he stopped breathing, because the work that was killing him was done. Notice what he did not say. He did not say, I am finished. He said, it is finished, the it matters. He was not announcing that he was tired. He was declaring that a thing outside him, the debt, the contract, the obligation hanging over every soul who would ever trust him, had reached its end. The object was the bond, not the man. He was identifying the corpse, and it was not his alone. It was the ledger's. Sit with the disciple maker's problem here. Most of the people you are forming believe in the cross. They would sign the doctrine, but they live as if the receipt is still pending. They behave like the bond was reduced, not closed. And a slave with a reduced debt is still a slave. This is the difference between a sin you confess and a slavery you keep. You can fully believe Jesus paid for your sin and still build your entire spiritual life on the assumption that you owe him the repayment. That is the trap. The slave hears paid in full and answers, then I must spend my life paying him back. But you cannot pay back a debt that is closed. There is no account to pay it into. The ledger is shut. To keep paying is not devotion. It is a refusal to believe the receipt. So when you disciple a man, you are not just teaching him to behave. You are teaching him to read the receipt that already has his name on it. Now hear the engine of it. For by one offering he has perfected forever those who are being sanctified. Hebrews 10:14. Read that slowly, because there are 2 timelines in one sentence, and a son lives in both at once. Perfected forever. That is finished. Past tense. Complete. By one offering, not many, not yours added to his, he has already perfected you. Done. Those who are being sanctified. That is ongoing. Present tense. You are still being shaped, still growing, still in the dirt of becoming. The slave collapses these into one. He thinks, I will be accepted when I am sanctified. He makes the finished thing depend on the ongoing thing. He puts his standing at the mercy of his progress. The Son keeps them apart in the right order. He is already perfected. He is therefore being sanctified. His growth is not the price of his belonging. It is the fruit of it. Teach your disciple to feel the difference in his chest. One says, become acceptable. The other says, you are accepted, now become. The whole house is built on which order you put those in. And here is why Hebrews leans so hard on the word one. By one offering. The old system ran on repetition. Day after day the priest stood and offered the same sacrifices, which, the writer says a few verses earlier, can never take away sins. A priest who is always standing is a priest whose work is never done. But the moment our great high priest had made one offering, he sat down. Sitting is the posture of finished work. He is not pacing the floor of heaven wondering if it took. He sat because there is nothing left to offer. So when your disciple keeps offering, keeps bringing God his performance, his streak of good days, his religious activity as though the altar still needs feeding, he is not honoring the sacrifice. He is repeating a system Christ ended by sitting down. Teach him to sit too. Not in laziness. In rest. The son works from a chair the slave never gets to use. This is exactly where Paul went when he had a church drifting back toward the ledger. He did not give them a pep talk. He gave them a family tree, and he made it a battlefield. Tell me, you that desire to be under the law, don't you listen to the law? For it is written that Abraham had 2 sons, one by the servant and one by the free woman. Galatians 4:21-22. 2 sons. Same father. One born to a slave, Hagar. One born to the free woman, Sarah. And Paul says this is an allegory, 2 covenants standing in 2 boys. These things contain an allegory, for these are 2 covenants. One is from Mount Sinai, bearing children to bondage, which is Hagar. Galatians 4:24. Watch what he just did. He took Sinai, the mountain of the law, the place of commandments, the holy thunder, and he filed it under slavery. The law, he says, is a mother who can only give birth to slaves. That is not an attack on the law. It is a diagnosis of what the law produces in you. Put a person under do this and live, and you will not get a son. You will get a slave who works under threat, or a hireling who works for wages, no matter how holy the rules he is keeping. Law produces slaves. Grace produces sons. You can run a flawless religious operation and be raising Ishmaels. And then Paul says the thing that should make every disciple maker put down the book. Nevertheless, what does the scripture say? Throw out the servant and her son, for the son of the servant will not inherit with the son of the free woman. Galatians 4:30. Cast it out. Not negotiate with it. Not manage it. Not let the slave mindset live quietly in the spare room and earn its keep. Throw it out of the house. Because here is the law of the inheritance, and it is brutal. The son of the slave will not inherit with the son of the free woman. The slave mentality does not get a smaller share of the inheritance. It gets none. You cannot receive an inheritance and earn it at the same time. The 2 cannot live in one house. So part of forming a son is conducting an eviction. You are going to walk with people who have hosted the slave for years, who learned in childhood that love is paid for, who learned in church that approval is performance with a steeple on it. The slave is not a stranger to them. The slave is family. It feels like humility. It feels like taking sin seriously. It feels like the responsible Christian thing to do. And you are going to have to help them throw it out anyway. Lovingly. Repeatedly. The slave does not leave once. It keeps knocking. This is the deepest reason behavior is not the foundation. A man can keep every rule and still be standing on Hagar. He can be moral, busy, sacrificial, exhausted, and the whole structure is built on debt. So the better he behaves, the heavier the building gets, and the more sure he is that he is the one holding it up. Watch how this shows up in the people you form, because it hides well. The man who cannot receive a compliment about his faith without deflecting it, he is protecting the ledger. Grace would mean he cannot take credit, and the slave needs the credit to feel safe. The woman who serves until she is hollow and calls her resentment commitment, she is paying an invoice no one sent her. The disciple who confesses the same sin with the same despair every week, never moving forward, because at the bottom he believes each fall reopens an account that Christ already closed. These are not behavior problems. They are foundation problems. You will treat them forever as conduct and never fix them until you take the person back to the receipt. Closing the contract changes the direction a man's whole life runs. The slave works toward acceptance and never arrives. The son works from acceptance and never runs out. Same activity, opposite engine. The slave prays to be heard. The son prays because he already is. The slave gives to stay in good standing. The son gives because the standing was settled at a cross he did not climb. When the contract closes, the arrows flip. Everything that used to flow toward God, to earn him now flows from God because you have him. That reversal is the entire difference between a tired servant and a free son. And it begins the day a man finally believes the bill is paid. Remember the elder brother. Years in the field. Never a command broken, by his own account. And he had never once eaten as a son. He worked the father's land like a hired man and called it faithfulness. The contract was never closed in his heart, so the inheritance, which was already his, all of it, all that is mine is yours, the father said, went completely unspent. That is the man you are most likely disciplining. Not the prodigal in the pig pen, the elder brother in the pew. So before you teach him one more thing to do, you have to take him to the receipt and make him read his own name on it. Nothing is owed. That's not the start of the journey. It's the ground you build the whole house on. Everything else this book asks you to do, every movement still ahead, rests on this slab. You cannot establish a son on a debt. You cannot send a man who thinks he still owes the gate money to leave. The contract has to close before the identity can open. So close it. Take them to John 19, to Hebrews 10, to Galatians 4. Show them the marketplace word stamped over their whole account. Tirelessly, paid in full. The door can open now. There is nothing behind it to fear. The punchline, the debt was not reduced at the cross. It was closed, and a son who keeps paying is calling Jesus a liar with his diligence. Servant or son, when you obey God, are you adding to an account you hope to fill, or spending from one that is already full? The son's confession, the receipt has my name on it. It says paid in full. I am not working off a debt, there is no debt to work off. I am not earning the house, I was born into it. I rest in what is finished, and I grow from there. For the disciple maker, sit with the person you are forming and have them name, out loud, the specific thing they are still secretly trying to pay God back for, a sin, a wasted decade, a debt they feel they owe. Write it on a slip of paper. Then read John 19:30 over it, write tetelestai, paid in full across the words, and have them tear it up. Make the eviction physical. Then watch for it to knock again next week, and do it again. Closing the contract is rarely a single conversation. It is a habit you build into them until they stop reaching for the ledger that is no longer there. Ask most Christians where they stand with God, and they answer with a verb. I'm trying, I'm growing, I'm getting there, I'm not where I should be. Every one of those answers is a status report on performance. Notice what's missing: a place, a location, a position that was true before they woke up this morning and will be true after they fail tonight. The New Testament does not describe your standing with God as a verb. It describes it as an address. A man can spend 20 years in church and never once relocate. He shows up, serves, gives, leads a group, and the whole time his sense of standing rises and falls with his week. Good week, he feels close. Bad week, he feels far. He thinks that fluctuation is normal. He thinks it's even humble. What it actually is homelessness. He has never moved into the address Christ bought for him. He's still living on the porch, performing for permission to come inside, when the deed already has his name on it. That man is the reason this chapter exists. Because you will disciple him. And if you don't move him from verb to address, you will spend years polishing his behavior and never once touch his identity. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. 2 Corinthians 5:17. In Christ, two of the most repeated words Paul ever wrote. He uses that phrase, or one just like it, more than 160 times. It is the most used description of a Christian in his letters. Not trying for Christ, not working toward Christ, in Christ. It's a location. And you didn't earn your way to the address. The mistake that breaks disciples, here is the error nearly every immature believer makes, and the one every orphan, slave, and hireling makes by default. They treat in Christ as a destination, a reward at the end of the road, a status you reach when your behavior finally catches up to the standard. So they live their whole Christian life trying to get in. More prayer to get in. More discipline to get in. More service, more sacrifice, more white-knuckled obedience, all aimed at securing a position they imagine is still pending. They strive toward union, as if it were the prize for a race well run. But union is not the finish line. It's the starting line. It is not where the mature arrive. It's where every believer begins the moment they are joined to Christ by the Spirit. You were placed into Him, buried with Him, raised with Him, seated with Him. Past tense, all of it. Done. You will never behave your way into a position grace already gave you. Read that again, because it's the hinge the whole book turns on. If your position is already settled, then your behavior is no longer how you get there. Your behavior becomes the overflow of being there. This is the difference between a servant and a son in a single sentence. The servant works to arrive. The son works because he already has. And here is the test that exposes which one you've made. Watch a person after they fail. The servant, who believes he's earning his position, panics. A bad week feels like lost ground, because in his mind it is. He has to claw his way back to where he thinks he was. The son who knows his position is fixed grieves the failure, but never doubts the address. He repents from inside the house, not from the curb. He never wonders if the sin unadopted him, because he knows he didn't adopt himself in the first place. The grace that placed him in Christ is the only thing keeping him there, and that grace did not flinch. Failure is the cleanest diagnostic you have. It tells you instantly whether the person you're forming believes they are in, or believes they're trying to get in. You were crucified before you tried. Paul takes it further than location. He takes it all the way down to identity. I have been crucified with Christ, and it is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. That life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself up for me. Galatians 2:20. Sit with the grammar. I have been crucified, it already happened. It is not a goal Paul is pursuing through intense devotion. It is a fact he is standing on. The old self-sourcing man, the orphan who had to manufacture his own identity, the slave who had to pay his own debt, the hireling who had to earn his own wage, that man died. Not is dying, not should die if I'm disciplined enough, died. With Christ, already. And what stands in his place? Christ lives in me. This is why a son's obedience is a completely different animal than a servant's. The servant obeys to construct an identity. The son obeys to express one he already received. The servant's effort flows toward becoming someone. The son's effort flows out from already being someone. Same actions sometimes, opposite engines always. You can disciple a man for 10 years, teach him to pray, to fast, to tithe, to serve, to lead, and never once tell him he was crucified with Christ before he ever lifted a finger. He'll do everything right, and he'll do it all as the elder brother, slaving in a field he already owns, working for a father whose estate is already in his name. That is the most dangerous condition in the church, and it is the one careful discipleship produces when it leaves out union. We'll come back to that man, because he's the one this book keeps in its sights. Your real life is somewhere you can't see it. There's one more verse, and it might be the most freeing of the three. For you died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. Colossians 3:3. Your life is hidden, stored, secured, not held in your hands, where you could drop it, not kept in your performance, where a bad week could lose it, not balanced on your consistency, your feelings, or your last good decision. Your life is hidden with Christ in God. 2 walls around it. Christ and then God himself. That is the safest vault in the universe, and you are not the one holding the key. This is why a son can rest. His identity is not exposed to his own failure. It's hidden somewhere his failure can't reach. The orphan can never rest, because his identity is in his own hands and his grip is slipping. The slave can never rest, because his debt is never marked paid. The hireling can never rest, because the wage is always tied to the next shift. But the son rests, because his life is already filed away in a place he didn't build and can't lose. You don't protect what's hidden in God. You enjoy it. Union is not a feeling you manufacture. Here's where disciples get tangled, so name it for them before they trip on it. Union with Christ is not an experience you generate. It's a fact you receive. You will have days when you feel 1,000 miles from God. The orphan reads that distance as evidence. See, I really am alone. The slave reads it as a verdict. God has finally pulled back over my sin. The hireling reads it as a pay cut. I must not have earned closeness this week. All three are reading their feelings as a report on their position. Their feelings are not qualified to report on their position. Their feelings weren't in the room when God placed them into Christ. The feeling rises and falls. The address does not move. Colossians does not say your life feels hidden with Christ. It says your life is hidden with Christ, whether you feel it on a given Tuesday or not. So you teach people to preach to their feelings instead of obeying them. When the orphan feeling shows up, the son does not chase a better emotion. He says the truer thing out loud: I am in Christ. My life is hidden in God. This feeling is real, but it is not the boss of my position. That is not denial. That is a son refusing to let a mood overrule a fact. This is one of the most practical things you will ever hand someone. Most believers are run ragged by their own internal weather. Give a person an address that does not move, and you've given them ground to stand on while the weather does whatever it wants. What this does to how you disciple. Slow down here, because this is where the doctrine becomes a method. If union is a position and not a prize, then your job as a disciple maker is not primarily to improve people. It's to inform them, not to drag them toward an identity they lack, but to keep telling them the identity they already have until they believe it down to the floor. That reframes almost everything. The struggling believer in front of you is not a project you're upgrading. He is a son who has forgotten his own name, and your work is to keep saying it back to him. The sin you're helping him fight is not a barrier between him and a position he's reaching for. It's beneath the dignity of the position he's already standing in. You don't fight sin to earn the address. You fight it because it doesn't fit the address. Watch how this lands on the elder brother, because he is everywhere in our churches. He is faithful, dependable, and quietly exhausted. He has confused his obedience for his sonship. Tell that man to try harder, and you bury him deeper. Tell him all that is mine is yours, and you might finally set him free. He doesn't need a sharper rebuke. He needs an inheritance he forgot he owned. Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. Luke 15:31. Say it again. The father said that to the obedient son, the one whose discipline had become a cage. Good behavior had become his bad news. And the only thing that opens that cage is not more performance. It's the reminder of a position grace already gave. Work from it, never toward it. So here is the engine of all sonship, the principle every movement in this book runs on. A son acts out of who he already is, never to become it. This single reversal changes everything about how you form people. Disciple a person toward an identity, and you'll produce a striver, a performer, an anxious worker checking the scoreboard. He'll be busy and afraid. Disciple a person from an identity, and you'll produce a son, someone whose obedience is gratitude with legs. You are not building people who are trying to get in. You are reminding people they are already in, and watching what pours out of that. This is why reveal the Father came first, and establish the Son comes later. Belonging before behavior. Position before performance. Address before activity. Every single time. Reverse the order, and you've built a religion of servants who mistake their slaving for sonship. The maturity you want in the people you disciple is not them climbing toward union. It's them waking up to the union they were given the day they believed, and finally living like it's true. Stop teaching people to reach for Christ. Start telling them where they already are. The punchline: you will never behave your way into a position grace already gave you, because you were placed in Christ before you ever lifted a finger for him. Servant or son. When you describe your standing with God, do you reach for a verb, I'm trying, I'm growing, or for an address, I am in Christ? The son's confession, I am in Christ. I did not earn this place, and I cannot lose it. The old me was crucified, Christ now lives in me. My life is hidden with him in God. I do not work to get in. I already am in. So today, I live out of what is already true. For the disciple maker, ask the person you're forming to write one sentence describing their relationship with God. If the sentence is built on a verb of effort, stop and read 2 Corinthians 5:17, Galatians 2:20, and Colossians 3:3 aloud together. Then have them rewrite the sentence beginning with the words, I am in Christ, and keep it where they'll see it daily until the new sentence becomes the one they reach for first. Listen to a person long enough, and you will hear which house they live in. Not by their theology, by their reflex. Something breaks, a sin surfaces, a prayer goes unanswered. Watch what comes out of them in that first unguarded second. One person flinches and pulls back. The other turns and runs in. Same God, same Bible, 2 completely different houses. The flinch is the slave. The running is the son. And the difference between them is not effort. It is a spirit. For you didn't receive the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you received the spirit of adoption, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. Romans 8:15. Read that again slowly, because the whole new covenant is hiding in one verse. There are two spirits on offer. One is a spirit of bondage, the inner posture of a slave, and its mother tongue is fear. The other is the spirit of adoption, the inner posture of a son, and its mother tongue is Abba. Paul says you did not receive the first one. He says you received the second. He is not asking you to try harder to feel like a son. He is telling you which spirit moved in. This is the chapter where the engine gets installed. We have revealed the Father, movement 1. We have closed the contract at the cross, movement 2. We have retired the wage, movement 3. But all of that could still be filed away as good information about your standing, true on paper, dead in your chest. What turns a legal fact into a lived reality is the Spirit. God does not just declare you a son in a courtroom. He moves into you and starts speaking the family language from the inside. That is what the word adoption actually carries. Huiothesia. It is the Greek word Paul uses, and it is worth slowing down for. It does not mean what we usually picture, a sentimental rescue, a kind man taking pity on a stray. In the Roman world, huiothesia was a formal legal act. A father would take someone who was not born into his family and place him by law as a full son, with the family name, the family authority, and the full rights of inheritance. The adopted son was not a lesser son. Under Roman law, he could not be disowned the way a natural son sometimes could. The placing was deliberate, permanent, and total. That is the word God chose for what he did to you. You were not promoted from servant to son for good behavior. You were placed, legally, permanently, with full rights. The word means God did not leave your standing ambiguous. He made it a matter of settled law, and then he sent his Spirit to make the law audible. And because you are children, God sent out the Spirit of his Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. Galatians 4:6. Notice the order, because disciple makers get this backwards constantly. He does not say God sent the Spirit so that you might become sons. He says, because you are children, God sent the Spirit. The Spirit is not the entrance fee. The Spirit is the evidence of an entrance already granted. First the placing, then the proof. First the status, then the cry. And what does the Spirit do once he arrives? He cries, Abba. Sit with how strange that is. Paul does not say the Spirit gives you better doctrine, though he does. He does not say the Spirit makes you more productive, though he may. He says the Spirit, deep in your heart, produces a cry. A word. A name. The most intimate word a child has for a father, Abba, comes pouring up out of a place in you that you did not train and cannot fake. That is the proof of sonship. Not your performance. The cry. This matters more than you know, because most disciples are looking for assurance in the wrong place. They are inspecting their behavior, trying to read their standing off their last 7 days. Was I consistent? Did I sin less? Have I earned the right to call him Father today? That is a slave auditing his ledger. And the ledger will never settle, because the ledger was never the point. The Spirit moves the proof out of your hands and into his mouth. You do not generate the cry of Abba. The Spirit does it in you. So when you turn to God and something in you reaches for him as Father, even clumsily, even through tears, even when you have nothing to show, that reaching is not your achievement. It is the Spirit testifying. It is the family resemblance surfacing. The very fact that you want to call him Father is the receipt. This is why I tell disciple makers to stop coaching behavior and start listening for language. Fear is the native tongue of the slave. Abba is the native tongue of the son. And here is the thing, you can hear which one a person speaks. Not when life is calm. Anyone sounds like a son when the sun is out. You hear it when something goes wrong. Listen to the slave when he fails. Every sentence moves away from God. The instinct is to hide, to fix, to repay, to disappear until the heat dies down. That is not weak faith. That is a spirit of bondage to fear, doing exactly what it was built to do. Keeping a frightened slave at arm's length from a master he assumes is angry. Now listen to the son when he fails. Same failure. Opposite direction. The son moves toward the father with the mess still in his hands. That direction, toward or away, is the whole diagnosis. It tells you which spirit is operating, regardless of how much scripture the person can recite. You can be a 40-year church member who knows every doctrine and still flinch like a slave the moment you sin. The elder brother in Luke 15 stood in his father's field, surrounded by his father's wealth, calling himself a slave. These many years I have served you. Luke 15:29. While the inheritance was his the entire time. He had the standing. He never received the spirit of it. He served for years and never once said Abba. Don't disciple people into elder brothers. Here is the trap, and it is sincere people who fall into it. We try to fix the fear by improving the behavior. The disciple is afraid God is angry, so we help him sin less, hoping that a cleaner life will quiet the fear. It never works, because the fear was never about the behavior. The fear was about the house. A slave who sins less is still a slave, just a more anxious one, now with more to protect. You cannot behave your way out of a spirit of bondage. You can only receive the other spirit. So the work is not behavior modification. The work is helping a person discover, in the very moment they expect punishment, that the house they are standing in is a Father's house, and that the Father gave them His Spirit precisely so they could come home with the failure instead of running from it. Sonship is learned the moment a son discovers he can bring the mess home. That is the lesson the prodigal learned and the elder brother missed. The younger son walked back up the road rehearsing a slave's speech, "Make me as one of your hired servants," Luke 15:19, and the father interrupted it. Ran to him. Robe, ring, feast. The boy came home with the mess in his hands, and the father did not negotiate the terms. He restored the son. That is the day the prodigal stopped being an orphan, because that is the day he found out the house was open even at his worst. Your disciples need to find that out. Not as a sermon, as an experience in the middle of an actual failure, with you standing next to them refusing to coach the behavior until you have corrected the direction. Because the goal of all of this is not a disciple who never falls. The goal is a disciple who, when he falls, runs the right way. A son who has so thoroughly received the spirit of adoption that his reflex under failure is to head straight for the Father, knowing the robe is already in the Father's hands. You cannot manufacture that reflex with rules. Only the Spirit installs it. But you can stop teaching the old one. You can stop letting your disciples interpret every stumble as evidence of an angry master. You can hand them the verse and refuse to let them argue with it. You did not receive a spirit of slavery to fall back into fear. That door is closed. There is only one Spirit left in the house, and he is already saying the word. Teach them to say it with him. 2 spirits, 2 languages, 2 houses. The slave's first word is fear. The son's first word is Abba. You can hear which one your disciple speaks, and by the grace of God and the Spirit he has already sent, you can help them learn the family language, until Abba is no longer a word they perform, but the cry that rises before they think. That is what the Spirit was sent to do. He is doing it in you right now. He will do it in the ones you are forming, too. The punchline: the slave's first word is fear, the son's first word is Abba, and the Spirit was sent so you'd speak the family language by reflex, not by rule. Servant or son, when something goes wrong in your life, what is your very first instinct toward God, to hide from Him or to run to Him? The direction you move is the house you actually live in. The son's confession: I did not receive a spirit of fear. I received the Spirit of the Son, and he calls God my Father. I belong before I behave. I am not a slave in this house. I am a son and I am home. For the disciple maker, ask the person you are forming to tell you about a recent failure. Don't fix it. Listen for the fear language: I blew it, God must be done with me. I have to clean up before I can pray. Then correct the direction before you ever touch the behavior. Teach them to turn around and walk toward the Father with the failure still in their hands. Do it with them out loud, right there. A short prayer that brings the mess home instead of hiding it. Sonship is learned the moment a son discovers he can bring the mess home. There are 2 ways to get money out of a father. You can earn it, or you can inherit it. They look similar from a distance. Both end with the son holding something the father gave. But the 2 roads could not be more different, and the difference is the whole reason this book exists. One road is a transaction. The other is a birthright. One runs out. The other never does. One you have to keep negotiating. The other was settled before you were old enough to ask. A wage is something you work to get. An inheritance is something you already have because of who your father is. Most discipleship is quietly teaching people to earn a wage from a father who already wrote them into the will. So you are no longer a slave but a son, and if a son, then an heir of God through Christ. Galatians 4:7. Read that verse like a ladder, because Paul built it like one. No longer a slave. That's the bottom rung, the old identity, fear and debt demolished. But a son, that's the middle rung, adopted, named belonging. And then Paul climbs one more, and this is the rung the church keeps forgetting exists. And if a son, then an heir. He will not let you stop at son. Sonship that doesn't know its heirship is sonship that still thinks it has to earn its keep. Paul wants the disciple to climb all the way up. Not slave, not even just son. Heir. A wage runs out. An inheritance belongs to you. Let me show you why the economy of the son is a completely different system from the economy of the servant. It comes down to the nature of the two things themselves. A wage is earned, paid, and spent. It is tied to the work. Stop working and it stops coming. It is calculated, owed, transferred, and then gone. And the next day you start the cycle again, because a wage is only ever as secure as your last shift. A wage keeps you anxious by design. It has to be re-earned forever. An inheritance works nothing like that. An inheritance is not tied to your labor. It is tied to your Father. It comes to you not because of what you produced, but because of whose you are. It was decided before you did anything. It does not run out at the end of the week, because it was never a payment for the week. It is yours by birth, not by performance. Now lay those two side by side and ask the question that exposes everyone. Which economy is your disciple living in? Because here is what happens. You can take a genuine child of God, adopted, named, fully in the family, and disciple him as if he's on payroll. You teach him to work for the next blessing, to earn the next sense of God's pleasure, to clock in on Monday and hope this week's effort secures this week's standing. You've taken an heir and put him on wages. You've handed a man with a guaranteed inheritance the anxious life of a day laborer. And he'll never notice because the work looks holy. The hireling negotiates. The son rests. Watch what each one does when the father walks into the room. The hireling negotiates. He's working an angle. What do I get for this? Is this enough? Did you notice what I did? What's the rate on obedience these days? Every interaction is a transaction with terms. He's calculating the exchange even while he serves, because in his economy, nothing is free and nothing is guaranteed. He has to secure each thing as it comes. Love is something he's still trying to close the deal on. The son rests, not because he's lazy, because the terms are already settled. He's not working for the inheritance. He's living inside it. He doesn't ask what he'll get for showing up, because he's not staff. He's family. The estate is already in his name. So when the father walks in, the son doesn't reach for his ledger. He's already home. Same father. Two entirely different economies. One man is negotiating his way towards something. The other is resting inside something he already owns. This is the elder brother to the letter. But he answered his father, "Behold, these many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed a commandment of yours. But you never gave me a young goat, that I might celebrate with my friends." Luke 15:29. Hear the hireling in every word. These many years I have served you. That's a man counting his shifts. I never disobeyed. That's a clean time card. You never gave me. That's a wage dispute. He is standing inside his father's estate, filing a complaint about his pay. He thinks he's been working for a goat. He thinks his obedience was supposed to purchase a party. And the father's answer is the most heartbreaking sentence in the parable, because it reveals what was true the entire time. Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. Luke 15:31. All that is mine is yours. It was already his. The whole estate, not as a wage to be earned by years of flawless service, as an inheritance he possessed from the day he was born a son. He could have thrown 1,000 parties with 1,000 friends on any day he wanted. The goat he was bitter about was already his. He'd been a millionaire living like a migrant worker, slaving for an allowance in a kingdom he already owned. That is what careful discipleship produces when it leaves out heirship. A clean record and a starving heart. A man who never disobeyed and never once enjoyed his inheritance. Do not raise elder brothers. Reframe obedience before you ruin it. Here is where this gets practical and where most disciple makers get it backwards. We teach obedience as the way in. Obey and you'll get the blessing. Obey and you'll secure the favor. Obey and you'll earn the closeness. We don't say it that crudely, but the disciple hears it that way, and his behavior proves he heard it. He obeys when he wants something from God and slacks when he thinks the account is full. That's a hireling's obedience. It flows toward the father, trying to get. A son's obedience flows the other direction entirely. A son doesn't obey to get. He already got. He obeys because he's family, because the inheritance is his, because he loves the one whose name is on the estate. His obedience isn't an invoice. It's a response. He's not working to be written into the will. He's already in the will, and his work is what gratitude looks like when it has hands. This is the reversal that has to happen in the people you form, and it changes nothing about what they do and everything about why they do it. Same prayer, same giving, same service, same fasting. But one man does it to earn a wage, and the other does it because he's spending an inheritance, and you will be able to tell them apart the moment something goes wrong. The hireling who has a bad week feels demoted. He thinks he lost ground, because in his economy, you're only as secure as your last shift. The son who has a bad week is grieved but never bankrupt, because his standing was never tied to his output in the first place. An inheritance doesn't shrink when you have a bad day. A wage does. You cannot teach a person to rest while you are also teaching him to earn. Pick one. The gospel already picked. Stop putting heirs on payroll. So here is the work in front of you. Find out which economy your disciple is running. It's not hard. Ask him why he obeys. Ask him what he's afraid happens if he doesn't. Ask him what he thinks he gets for a good week. The answers will tell you instantly whether he believes he's an heir or thinks he's on staff. A son says, I obey because I'm his and I love him. A hireling says some version of, I obey so that he'll, and whatever finishes that sentence is the wage he thinks he's working for. Then take him to Galatians 4:7 and make him climb the whole ladder. No longer a slave, but a son. And if a son, then an heir. Do not let him stop at son. Push him to the top rung, where the inheritance is, where the work stops being a transaction and starts being an inheritance enjoyed. Because the aim was never to make people who serve God well. The world is full of religious servants, and most of them are exhausted. The aim is sons who know they are heirs, who serve out of an inheritance they already possess instead of toward a wage they're terrified to lose. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ. Romans 8:17. Look at how high Paul takes it. Heirs of God. Not heirs of some blessings God hands out for good behavior. Heirs of God himself. And fellow heirs with Christ, you inherit alongside the Son, sharing in everything that is his. That is not a wage any amount of work could ever earn. It is an inheritance only a father could give, and he gave it the day he gave you his Spirit. You cannot pay for that. You can only receive it. So stop teaching people to clock in. A wage is something you leave with at the end of the day. An inheritance is something you wake up already inside of. The servant is always working toward a payment that runs out. The son is always living out of a fortune that doesn't. Move your people from one to the other. Stop teaching them to earn a wage from a father who already wrote them into the will. The punchline, a wage is earned and runs out. An inheritance is received and belongs to you, so stop disciplining heirs as if they were still on payroll. Servant or son. Finish this sentence honestly. I obey God so that he will. If anything fills that blank, you're working for a wage, and the inheritance has been yours the whole time. The son's confession, I am no longer a slave. I am a son, and if a son, then an heir. I am an heir of God, and a fellow heir with Christ. I do not work to get the inheritance. The inheritance is already mine. So I do not obey to earn. I obey because I belong. All that is his is mine. For the disciple maker, ask the person you're forming, why do you obey God? And listen for the wage hiding in the answer. If they obey to get something, don't scold the answer, show them the will. Read Galatians 4:7 and Romans 8:17 aloud together, then have them say back to you, in their own words, the difference between working for a wage and living off an inheritance. Keep returning to that question over the weeks, until because I'm his is the first thing out of their mouth, not the last. You have a man in front of you. He wants to grow. He's asking you what to do. Resist the question. Every instinct you have will push you to answer it. Give him a reading plan. Assign a habit. Hand him a list. It feels like discipleship because something is moving. But if you start there, you've already lost. You've told him the most important thing about God before you ever opened your mouth. God is waiting to see if you'll perform. That is not the gospel. That is the orphanage with a curriculum. Movement 1 is the first thing you do and the thing you keep doing. Before behavior, before disciplines, before a single assignment, you reveal the Father's face. Not his rules, his face. The whole rest of the method rests on this one move, and most discipleship skips it entirely. So we won't skip it. You can't give what you've never seen. Philip had walked with Jesus for years. He'd watched the miracles, heard the teaching, eaten the bread that multiplied in his hands. And near the end, he said the thing every disciple is secretly saying, Lord, show us the Father, and that will be enough for us. John 14:8, show us the Father. That will be enough. Philip knew, underneath all his following, that he had not yet seen the face that would settle him. He was a disciple, with an orphan's hunger still intact. Listen to how Jesus answers him. Have I been with you such a long time, and do you not know me, Philip? He who has seen me has seen the Father. How do you say, show us the Father? John 14:9. This is the center of everything. Jesus did not come mainly to show us how to live. He came to show us the Father's face. Everything he did, the touching of lepers, the weeping at tombs, the welcome of children and prostitutes and thieves, was the Father made visible. When you watch Jesus move toward the broken, you are not watching a kind man working around a stern God. You are watching God. He who has seen me has seen the Father. So here is your first job as a disciple maker, and it will expose you fast. You cannot reveal a Father you have not seen. If God's face, in your own gut, is folded into a frown, if you secretly suspect he's disappointed, tolerating you, keeping a tab, that is the God you will hand down. Not in your words, in your tone, in what you celebrate and what you correct, in the speed at which you reach for the to-do list. Discipleship is contagious before it is instructional. People catch your God before they learn your content. The orphan's lie, named plainly, every person you disciple walks in carrying one core lie. Strip away the symptoms, and it's always the same sentence. I have to source my own identity, provision, and approval. That's the orphan consciousness. I'm on my own. No one is coming, so I'll manufacture it myself. I'll build an identity out of my performance. I'll secure my own provision because no one's looking out for me. I'll chase approval on credit because I've never had it for free. 3 deep needs: who am I? Will I be okay? Am I loved? And the orphan answers all 3 with the same exhausting word: me. You will recognize this person. They're tired. They might be religiously busy, even impressive. But there's a frantic edge underneath the discipline, a striving that never lands. They serve like everything depends on them, because in their inner world it does. They have no Father to draw from, so they draw from themselves until they are empty. Then they call the emptiness humility. You do not fix this with better behavior. You cannot discipline an orphan into a son. More obedience just makes a more polished orphan. The lie isn't dismantled by trying harder. It's dismantled by a revelation. By a Father who walks into the room and says, I am your identity. I am your provision. I am your approval. You don't have to source what I've already given. That revelation is the whole point of Movement 1. The right to become. Here's the order, and the order is the gospel. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, to those who believe in his name. John 1:12. Notice what comes first. They received him. Then he gave them the right to become children. Belonging is the gift, not the goal. You don't behave your way into the family, and then, after a probationary period, get told you're a child. You're received, you're given the right of a child, and the becoming flows out of that standing. The orphan thinks the verse runs backwards. He thinks it reads, prove yourself and maybe you'll earn the right to belong. Half the discipleship in the church is built on his misreading. We hand new believers a behavior contract and call it growth. We make sonship the prize at the finish line instead of the ground under their feet. It's not a prize. It's a gift given up front before a single thing is done. And here's the line your whole method will rise or fall on. Behavior follows belonging, it never leads it. Read it again, because everything in you wants to reverse it. We believe, deep down, that if we just get people behaving, the belonging will eventually feel real. It never works. Behavior built on top of orphan identity is a tower on sand, taller and taller, more anxious every floor. But belonging laid down first becomes bedrock. A person who knows he's a son will out-obey a slave 100 to 1, and he'll do it from rest instead of fear. So you lay the belonging first. On purpose. As a method. While he was still far off, look at the most famous picture Jesus ever painted of the Father. The younger son has spent the inheritance, wrecked his life, rehearsed his groveling speech. He's coming home to negotiate his way into the servant quarters. And then this. But while he was still a great way off, his father saw him and was moved with compassion and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. Luke 15:20. While he was still far off. Before the speech. Before the cleanup. Before one word of repentance left his mouth. The Father was already watching the road, which means he'd been watching it every day. And the second he saw the shape of his boy on the horizon, he ran. Fathers in that culture didn't run. It was undignified, a loss of face. He didn't care. He hiked up his robe and sprinted down the road toward a filthy, failed son who hadn't earned a thing. And he reached him before the apology, before the change, and covered him with kisses. That is the face you are revealing. Not a God tapping his foot at the door. A God already running. A God whose compassion outruns your repentance, whose welcome arrives before your worthiness. You disciple people into the arms of that Father, or you're not preaching the gospel. You're managing the slave the elder brother became. And remember who the elder brother is, because he's the warning over this whole book. He was the obedient one. The one who stayed, who worked, who never broke a rule. And he stood outside the party, furious, saying, I served you all these years. Years of flawless behavior, and he never once knew he was an heir. All that I have is yours, the father told him, and the son had no idea. He had the standing of a child and the consciousness of a slave. You can produce that man. Easily. You produce him every time you start with the contract and skip the face. Spend the first season on the face. So slow down. Before you give the person in front of you a single thing to do, spend the first season of your relationship only on who God is to them. Not who he is in the abstract, who he is to them. Their God, the one behind their eyes, the one whose imagined expression governs their whole inner life. There's a question that opens that door, and I want you to actually ask it. Then close your mouth and listen. The answer is a window into the house they grew up in, spiritually and otherwise. Some will say his face is hard, disappointed, turned away. That's the slave bracing for wrath. Some will say he's evaluating, weighing, calculating whether they've done enough lately. That's the hireling, still working for wages, still reading the ledger in God's eyes. Some will say they can't picture a face at all. Just distance, static, an empty chair. That's the orphan, no father in the frame, so no face to find. Whatever they tell you, you've just been handed your assignment. You don't argue them out of it. You don't correct the feeling. You take them to the road in Luke 15, and you stay there until the running father becomes more real than the frowning one they've been carrying. You take them to John 14, and you let them watch Jesus, because to watch Jesus is to watch the Father, and the Father they'll see does not match the face they've imagined. This is not a warm-up to the real discipleship. This is the real discipleship. Everything else, the closing of the contract, the leaving of the wage, the establishing of the Son, the reproducing of the Father, is built on whether this man ever truly sees the face. Reveal the Father first. The rest of the method is just helping him believe what he saw. The punchline: you cannot disciple a person into sonship by what they do. You can only reveal the Father whose face makes sons. Servant or son. When you picture God looking at you right now, what is his face doing? And would you let that picture stand if it were the only thing you taught the next person you disciple? The son's confession: I am not on my own. My father saw me while I was still far off, and he ran. He is my identity, my provision, and my approval. I do not have to source what he has already given. I belong before I behave. I am his child. For the disciple maker, before you assign anything, any book, habit, or discipline, sit with the person and ask one question. When you picture God looking at you, what's his face doing? Do not fix the answer. Write it down. Then take them to Luke 15, 20 and John 14, 9 and walk slowly through both, asking, how does the Father here compare to the face you just described? Make this the entire content of your first season together. You'll know the season is done not when they've completed an assignment, but when they can describe God's face toward them, and it finally matches the running Father, and they believe it about themselves. Somewhere inside the person you are disciplining, there is an invoice. It is unpaid. It is in their name. And every morning they wake up owing. They may not be able to read it out loud. They may not even know it is there. But it runs everything. It is the reason they pray harder after they sin and softer when things are going well. It is the reason they flinch when you mention God's standards. It is the reason they serve and never feel like it counts. Down underneath the activity, a slave is trying to pay off a debt he can never quite settle. You will not fix that with better behavior. You can only close the account. This is movement 2. In movement 1 you revealed the Father, belonging before behavior. Now you take the thing that keeps a person from resting in that belonging, and you end it. You find the debt. You name it. And you mark it paid with the finished work of Christ, in the exact language of their guilt. Here is the rule for the whole chapter. Deal with the debt before you ever deal with the behavior. Get that order wrong, and you will spend years coaching conduct over a fear you never touched. The fear will outlast every habit you install. The slave's hidden ledger. A slave is not lazy. That is the surprise. A slave often works harder than a son, because a slave is working off a sentence. He is not serving out of love. He is serving to stay ahead of punishment. His motive is fear, and fear is tireless. So the slave keeps a ledger. Every sin is a charge. Every good deed is a small payment. He is forever doing the math, hoping the column of payments will one day catch up to the column of charges. It never does. The math was rigged from the start, because the debt was never the kind you pay down by installments. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, that no one would boast. Ephesians 2:8-9. A gift cannot be paid back. The moment you try, you have insulted it. You have turned a gift into a loan. And a man who thinks he is repaying a loan will never rest, because the balance is always due. This is the slave's whole problem in one line. He is trying to pay for something that was given. The verse that closes the account. There is one sentence in Scripture that takes the invoice out of your hands. It is short. It does not argue. It just announces a state of affairs that is already true. There is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Romans 8:1. Slow down on every word, because the slave needs each one. There is therefore, this is a conclusion, a verdict already reached. Paul is not hoping. He is reporting. Now, not someday, not after more growth. Now, today, while you are still a mess. No condemnation, none. Not less. Not a reduced sentence. Not condemnation held back as long as you behave. None. For those who are in Christ Jesus, there is the only condition, and it is not a behavior. It is a location. If you are in Him, the verdict is already in, and the verdict is not guilty. Read it to the person you are forming, and watch them try to add a footnote. They will want to say yes, no condemnation, but I still feel it. Yes, but I keep failing. Yes, but surely there are limits. That yes, but is the slave's ledger refusing to close. Your job is not to argue with the feeling. Your job is to keep handing them the verse until the verse outranks the feeling. There is no condemnation. Not manageable condemnation. Not earned out over time condemnation. None. The account is closed. Once for all, forever. The slave's deepest objection is not about the size of the payment. It is about its permanence. Even if I was forgiven, surely I keep racking up new charges. Surely the slate gets dirty again by Thursday. He believes the cross handled his past, but he is back on the clock for his present. Hebrews puts that objection to death in a single verse. For by one offering he has perfected forever those who are being sanctified. Hebrews 10:14. Hold the two halves of that verse next to each other, because everything hangs on the tension between them. He is perfected forever. Past tense, permanent result. Finished. Complete. There is no offering left to make, because the one offering already did everything an offering could do. Those who are being sanctified. Present tense, ongoing, unfinished. Still in process. Still growing. Still failing on Tuesdays. Look at what that means. You are already perfected in your standing, while you are still being worked on in your walk. Those are not in conflict. They are two different ledgers. One was settled forever at the cross. The other is being slowly lived out by the Spirit. The slave collapses them into one and panics every time his walk dips, because he thinks his standing dips with it. It does not. The offering was made once. It does not get remade when you fail. It does not get topped up when you obey. It is finished. When Jesus said it is finished from the cross, he was not describing his suffering. He was using the word a merchant stamped across a bill when the debt was paid in full. Tirelessly. Paid. Closed. Nothing owing. That word is stamped across your disciples' invoice. They just have not read it yet. The faithful man who never read it. Here is the warning that should keep every disciple maker honest. The slave is not always the rebel. More often in our churches, he is the model member. Look at the elder brother in Luke 15. He never left. He never wasted a thing. He worked the field every single day. And listen to how he describes those years to his own father. These many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed a commandment of yours. Luke 15:29. I have served you. The word is the one a slave uses. Standing on his father's land, surrounded by his father's wealth, with the inheritance legally his the entire time, he calls himself a servant working off a debt. He had every right of a son and the inner life of a hireling. The invoice was paid before he was born, and he never read it. That is the danger of skipping this movement. You can disciple a person into years of flawless service and never once close their contract. They will look like your best fruit. They will be your most exhausted member. And one bad season will reveal that their whole obedience was a payment plan, not a relationship. This is why good behavior can be bad news. A faithful slave is harder to free than a wandering one, because his diligence hides the debt instead of exposing it. Do not let the activity fool you. Find the ledger underneath it. Hearing the slave in real time. Here is where the doctrine becomes a method, because the debt does not announce itself as theology. It announces itself as a tone of voice. Teach the person you are forming to hear it, the way you would teach someone to hear a wrong note. Slave thinking has a vocabulary. Listen for it. Train your disciple to catch these phrases as they leave their own mouth. Not to feel guilty about them, that would just be a new charge on the ledger, but to recognize them as the slave talking and to answer the slave with the verse. I have to meets, there is no condemnation. God will be upset meets, he has perfected me forever. I'm not doing enough meets, it is finished. This is real-time work. The slave does not speak in seminars. He speaks in the shower, in the car, in the silence after a failure. So the skill you are building is the ability to overhear yourself and close the contract on the spot. Close it in their language. Generic absolution does not reach a specific wound. If you want the relief to land, you have to find the actual invoice, the precise thing they believe they still owe, and close that one. For one person, it is a sin from years ago that they are still quietly paying for with self-punishment. For another, it is a constant sense that they are letting God down. For another, it is the conviction that their service is the rent they pay to stay in the house. Find the real charge. Then speak the finished work straight into it. Not God forgives you in the abstract. Say that specific thing you are still paying for. Christ already paid it in full, and the receipt is stamped finished. You are not behind. There is nothing to make up. When you close the right contract, you can see it happen. The shoulders drop. The breath changes. Something in the face that was braced for impact finally unbraces. That is what fear leaving a body looks like. And it is the precondition for everything that comes after, because there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear has punishment. He who fears is not made perfect in love. 1 John 4:18. Fear and love cannot share a room. As long as the disciple is afraid of punishment, they cannot love freely. They will always be managing the threat instead of receiving the Father. Perfect love does not coax fear out gently over years. It casts it out. The finished work is how that love gets specific enough to do the casting. So you deal with the debt first. Always first. You do not start with the behavior, because a frightened slave cannot obey his way to peace. You start by closing the account that is generating the fear, and only then, from rest, from a settled standing. Do you ever talk about how a son lives? Retire the ledger, and you have not made the person lazy. You have made them free. A son who knows the account is closed does not work less. He works without terror. His obedience stops being a payment and starts being a response. The invoice is in their name. The word finished is already stamped across it. Your job is to read it to them until they believe it. The punchline: deal with the debt before you ever deal with the behavior, because a slave will work himself raw trying to pay an invoice Christ already stamped, finished. Servant or son. When you serve God, are you working off a debt you feel you still owe, or out of one that was already marked paid in full? The son's confession: there is now no condemnation for me, because I am in Christ. The one offering perfected me forever. My debt is not being paid down, it is finished. I do not serve to settle an account. I serve because the account is closed. For the disciple maker for 1 week, have the person you are forming write down every I have to they feel toward God. Every obligation, every he'll be upset if, every I'm not doing enough. Then sit down together and go through the list line by line. Close each contract with scripture out loud. Romans 8:1 over the condemnation, Hebrews 10:14 over the fear of falling short. It is finished over the sense of debt. Don't rush it. Watch the relief change their face as the ledger empties. That loosening is the fear leaving, and it has to leave before any real obedience can begin. Watch what they ask you for. Disciple a person long enough, and a pattern surfaces. They come to you with questions, and almost all of their questions wear the same uniform. What should I do? How often should I pray? Is this allowed? What's the next step? Give me a plan. The questions sound spiritual. They sound hungry. They sound like a person who wants to grow. But listen underneath the words. Every one of those questions is the question of a hireling. The hireling lives by the task. He needs to know the job, so he can do the job so he can keep the job. He measures himself by output. He sleeps well on the nights he produced, and badly on the nights he didn't. And when he comes to you, he is not asking who he is. He is asking what he owes. He wants the assignment. He wants to know the wage and the work that earns it. Your job in Movement 3 is to stop answering that question the way he wants it answered. Not because the work doesn't matter, because the wage has to die first. Remember where we are in the method. You revealed the father, belonging before behavior. You closed the contract, the finished work ended the slave's debt, and it is finished, silenced the demand to earn his way out of wrath. The slave's chains are off. But here's the thing nobody warns you about. A man can walk out of the slave's cell and straight into the hireling's office. He stops working to avoid punishment and starts working to collect a wage. The fear is gone, the transaction remains. He no longer serves to escape hell, but he still serves to feel approved, to feel useful, to feel like he's pulling his weight in the family. The motive upgraded from fear to reward. It still isn't love. It still isn't sonship. And this one is harder to spot because it looks so much like devotion. That's why this movement gets its own chapter. The slave you can free with a verdict. The hireling you have to retire. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant doesn't know what his Lord does. But I have called you friends, for everything that I heard from my Father I have made known to you. John 15:15. Read that slowly, because Jesus just dismantled the entire identity of the person you're disciplining. The servant doesn't know what his Lord does. That's the whole definition. The servant is kept on the outside of the master's mind. He gets instructions, not intentions. Tasks, not the heart behind the tasks. He executes, he doesn't understand. He is useful, and he is distant. That is the ceiling of the servant's whole relationship. Kept close enough to work, never close enough to know. And Jesus says, that's over. I don't call you that anymore. I call you friends. And here's the proof. Everything I heard from my Father, I have made known to you. The friend gets the Father's heart. The friend is brought inside the conversation. The friend isn't handed a task list at the door. He's seated at the table where the plans are made. This is the move you are making with a person. From the door to the table. From the task list to the family conversation. From tell me what to do to let me show you who you are, and watch what your hands start doing from there. Service is not the enemy here. Hear that clearly, because the elder brother in you will twist it. We are not turning your disciple into someone who does nothing. The friend in John 15 is more fruitful than the servant ever was. Jesus says so 3 verses later. We are not killing the work. We are killing the wage. We are not making a lazy person. We are making a son who can finally serve without bleeding for approval every time he does. There is all the difference in the world between serving to be accepted and serving because you are. One drains you. One overflows from you. One is a man bailing water out of a sinking boat, terrified, exhausted, never done. The other is a man pouring from a cup that someone else keeps filling. They look the same from a distance. Both men are moving water. Get close and they could not be more different. One is trying to stay alive. The other already is. Now go to Bethany, because Luke gives us this exact split in 2 sisters at one dinner. Now, as they went on their way, he entered into a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha received him into her house. She had a sister called Mary, who also sat at the Lord's feet and heard his word. But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she came up to him and said, Lord, don't you care that my sister left me to serve alone? Ask her therefore to help me. Luke 10:38-40. Watch Martha, because Martha is most of the church and most of the people you disciple. Martha is not a villain. Martha is generous. Martha opened her home. Martha is doing real, good, hospitable work, and Jesus is in her house because she made room for him. Don't miss that. The woman serving is the woman who let him in. But look at the word Luke chooses. Distracted, pulled in pieces. The Greek picture is of being dragged around, divided, your attention shredded by the demands of the doing. Martha is serving Jesus and slowly losing Jesus in the serving. The meal for him is crowding out him. And then the tell, Lord, don't you care? There it is. The hireling's heart always eventually accuses the master. Because the hireling believes the relationship runs on his output, when the output isn't noticed, when the work isn't rewarded, when nobody comes to help him carry it, he doesn't conclude he's loved anyway. He concludes he's been forgotten. Don't you care? Is what service for wages says the moment the wage doesn't come. It's the cry of a daughter who is acting like an employee in her own home. Then notice what she asks Jesus to do. Make Mary work too. Pull her sister off the floor and put her back on the schedule. The hireling can't stand the sight of someone resting. Resting feels like cheating. It feels like Mary is getting paid without clocking in. The elder brother in Luke 15 has the same allergy. He can't celebrate a son being welcomed home, because welcome that isn't earned offends everything he's built his life on. Now look at Mary, and kill the lie you were raised with, that Mary is the lazy sister. But the Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is needed. Mary has chosen the good part, which will not be taken away from her. Luke 10:41-42. Mary chose the good part. Jesus said it, not me. Mary is not lazy. Mary is positioned. She is at the feet, which in that world was the posture of a disciple, the seat of a student, the place of the one being trained to carry what the teacher carries. Mary took the seat of a son. Martha kept the apron of a servant, and the difference between them was never effort. Martha worked harder than Mary all afternoon. The difference was belonging. Mary received before she gave. Martha gave to try to be received. A daughter at the table. A servant waiting on it. Same house. Same Lord. Same dinner. Completely different gospel. And notice the promise Jesus tacks onto the end, which will not be taken away from her. The wage can always be taken away. That's the nature of a wage. You're only as secure as your last shift, only as approved as your latest output. Miss a day and the ledger resents you. But what Mary received at the feet was not a wage. It was a portion, an inheritance, the kind of thing that belongs to you because of whose you are, not because of what you produced. You cannot lose what you didn't earn. Tell the person you're forming that, and watch something in their shoulders come down. The son's security doesn't move when his productivity does. Here is what this means for you, the one doing the forming. You have to learn to disappoint the hireling on purpose. When the person you're disciplining comes to you, and they will, constantly, with the do question, you have to develop the discipline of not answering it on its terms. Not yet. They'll ask for the rule, the practice, the plan, the next box to check. Your instinct, the hireling instinct in you, will be to give it to them. It feels helpful. It feels productive. It gives you both something to measure. And it quietly reinforces the very thing you're trying to put to death. So slow down, and gently, lovingly refuse. When they ask, what should I do? You keep walking them back to, who are you? When they ask for the assignment, you sit them down at the feet first. You are not withholding the work to be difficult. You are withholding it long enough for the work to come from the right place. Because work that comes out of, what do I do for God, builds a hireling who will eventually accuse God of not caring. Work that comes out of, who am I in God, builds a son who serves the way a son serves, freely, restfully, without keeping the receipt. Train them to find their feet, not their to-do list. You'll know it's working when their questions start to change. When what should I do? Slowly becomes Father, what are you doing? When they stop asking you for tasks and start telling you what they've already begun to carry. Not because you assigned it, but because it overflowed. When you watch them serve harder than ever and not bleed for it. That's the friend Jesus described. Inside the conversation. Knowing the Father's heart. Hands full, soul at rest. The hireling asks what the work is worth. The son already knows what he's worth, so he's finally free to work. Stop serving to be accepted. Start serving because you already are. The punchline, the hireling serves to be accepted. The son serves because he already is, and only one of them can rest. Servant or son. When God seems silent and the work goes unnoticed, is your first reflex to try harder, or to cry with Martha, Lord, don't you care? The son's confession, I am not at the door, I am at the table. My Father has made his heart known to me, so I no longer work to be received, I work because I already am. I choose the good part. I sit at his feet first, and what my hands do flows from there. For the disciple maker, the next 3 times the person you're forming asks you, what should I do? Do not answer it. Instead, ask them back, who are you? And don't move on until they can say it as a son. Then, and only then, talk about the work. Make this a standing rule between you, out loud, so they know the redirect is coming and learn to do it for themselves. A man can be convinced he is a son and still live like an orphan. I have watched it happen. He hears the gospel of adoption. Something breaks open. He weeps in the back row. He tells you it changed everything. And 6 weeks later, he is back to flinching when his phone rings, back to earning, back to keeping the ledger he swore he had torn up. He was moved. He was never established. That is the gap this chapter exists to close. For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, these are children of God. Romans 8:14. Read what Paul did not say. He did not say, as many as had a moment with the Spirit, these were once children of God. He used a present, continuous verb. Led, ongoing, daily. The mark of a son is not a single revelation in the past. It is a way of being walked through an ordinary Tuesday. Sonship is not an event you attended. It is a current you live inside. We have come a long way. We revealed the Father. We closed the contract. We retired the wage. The disciple in front of you now knows he is a son. But knowing is not yet living. A truth he visits on Sundays is not the same as a truth he wakes up inside of. This is the movement where identity stops being a doctrine he affirms and becomes the operating system he runs. Here is the line to write on the inside of your skull as a disciple maker. A son who knows it once is moved. A son who lives from it daily is established. What operating system actually means. Your operating system is the thing running underneath everything else. You do not think about it. You do not summon it. It is simply on, deciding how every other program behaves. Most disciples have grace installed as an app, a thing they open when they need it, then close. Underneath, the old system is still humming. Orphan, slave, hireling. Survival, fear, wages. So the moment the crisis hits, grace closes and the old system takes the wheel. Establishing a son means moving sonship from an app to the operating system. From a thing he opens to the thing everything else opens inside of. And you can tell which system is running by watching the morning. The ordinary morning. Watch a man's first 10 conscious minutes, and you will know which house he lives in. The orphan wakes already bracing. What do I have to hold together today? Who is going to let me down? What is mine to defend? The slave wakes to the ledger. Did I pray enough? Did I sin last night? Am I in good standing or am I behind? The hireling wakes to the job. What do I owe? What do I produce? What gets me the nod? The son wakes to a fact that was true before he opened his eyes. Behold, how great a love the Father has given to us, that we should be called children of God. And so we are. 1 John 3:1. And so we are. John writes it like a man putting his fist on the table. It is not aspirational. It is not pending review. It is a present tense fact that does not depend on the quality of your sleep or the state of your conscience. The son's whole morning bends around that one sentence. He does not wake up to become something. He wakes up as something, and then he lives out of it. And John does not stop at what you already are. He tells you where it is going. Beloved, now we are children of God, and it is not yet revealed what we will be. But we know that, when he is revealed, we will be like him, for we will see him just as he is. 1 John 3:2. Hold the two halves together, because the disciple needs both. Now we are children of God, the status is finished, settled, present tense, done. It is not yet revealed what we will be. The inheritance is so large, it has not finished unfolding. The son lives in that tension every day, and it does not unsettle him. His identity is fixed, his future is unimaginable. He is fully a child already, and there is more coming than he can picture. That is the opposite of the orphan, who has nothing guaranteed and no future he can count on. The son has both feet on a finished fact, and his eyes on an inheritance still being revealed. That is the difference between earning your way up to the day and descending into the day from a settled place. The slave climbs toward acceptance. The son starts the day already accepted and spends it spending the inheritance. Identity is the lens, not the lecture. Once sonship is the operating system, it becomes the lens you read everything through, not a verse you recite, but the air every decision breathes. A decision comes. The orphan asks, what's safest for me? The son asks, what does a free man, who has nothing to prove and nothing to lose, do here? The questions produce different lives. A failure comes. The slave hears the failure and hears condemnation, proof he was never really in. The son hears the same failure and hears correction, the discipline of a father who is not deciding whether to keep him, because that was never on the table. I have been crucified with Christ, and it is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. That life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself up for me. Galatians 2:20. This is Paul handing you the lens itself. Notice he does not say, I am trying to live for Christ. He says the old self is already dead, and a new life is already living. And the present, ongoing life he lives by faith in the Son of God. He reads every hour through the fact of union. The I that had to perform is on the cross. The life that remains is borrowed, beloved, and secure. That is not a feeling Paul worked up. It is the lens he chose to look through, until it became the only way he could see. A win comes. And here is where you find out whether the operating system actually changed. The slave wins and grabs the win as evidence. See, I'm worth keeping. The son wins and has nowhere to put the win, because his worth was settled before the win existed. So he just hands it back to the father and goes looking for someone else to bless. The win does not inflate him. It cannot. There is no empty place inside him for it to fill. Why obedience stops straining? This is the part disciple makers most need to see, because it reverses everything they were taught about effort. When sonship is the operating system, obedience stops being a strain and starts being an expression. The slave obeys toward belonging. Every act of obedience is a payment, a brick laid on a wall that never gets high enough. It is exhausting because it is uphill, and it is uphill because he is still climbing toward a place he already lives. The son obeys from belonging. The obedience runs downhill, out of a fullness that is already there. Same action, opposite direction, and the direction is the whole difference between a disciple who burns out at 34 and a disciple who is still glowing at 70. This is exactly where the elder brother went wrong, and it is the warning that should keep every disciple maker honest. He had years of flawless service behind him. Lo, these many years do I serve you, and I never disobeyed a commandment of yours. That is a man whose behavior was uphill the entire time, obeying toward a belonging he thought he had to earn, while standing the whole time on land that was already his. Son, you are ever with me, and all that I have is yours. He was established in nothing. He was a son living from a slave's operating system, and his clean record never told him the truth. That is the danger of establishing behavior without establishing identity. You can produce a man who never breaks a rule and never once knows he is loved. Good behavior, run on the wrong operating system, is just a slower way to stay an orphan. You cannot make a man's obedience flow downhill by demanding more obedience. You can only do it by establishing the source. Get the operating system right, and the behavior takes care of itself, not because you stopped caring about behavior, but because you finally addressed the thing behavior was always downstream of. The mouth disciples the heart. So how do you establish it? How do you take a truth he believes on good days and weld it to the floor of an ordinary one? You give him words. You teach him to speak his sonship before he ever speaks a request. This is not positive thinking. This is the oldest discipline in Scripture. God's people were always a confessing people, putting truth in the mouth so it could travel down into the chest. The heart is slow and stubborn. The mouth is faster. So you preach to yourself out loud, in your own voice, the things that are already true, and the heart, which has been listening to the orphan's voice for decades, finally hears another voice in the room. The mouth disciples the heart, not the other way around. Most disciples have it backwards. They wait to feel like a son before they will speak like one. So they speak nothing, the feeling never comes, and the old system keeps narrating. You reverse it. You tell them to speak the fact before the feeling arrives, every morning out loud, before they bring God a single petition. Identity before request. Status before ask. Who I am before what I need. A son who speaks his sonship every morning will, in time, stop needing to remember it. It will simply be the room he wakes up in. That is what established looks like. Not a man who had a moment. A man who has a morning and a lens, and a mouth that preaches the truth to him before the day can lie to him. You have revealed the Father. You have closed the contract. You have retired the wage. Now you install the operating system, and you do it with words, repeated, until the cry of Abba is not something he reaches for, but something he wakes up already saying. The punchline, a son who knows it once is moved. A son who lives from it daily is established. Servant or son, in the first 10 minutes of tomorrow morning, before you have done anything, will you wake up already accepted? Or will you wake up needing to earn the day? The son's confession, I am a child of God, and so I am. Before I work, I belong. Before I ask, I am loved. I have nothing to prove, nothing to earn, and nothing to lose, because the Father settled all of it at the cross. Today I do not climb toward his acceptance, I live out of it. I am led by his Spirit, and the Spirit in me cries, Abba, Father. For the disciple maker, write a short son's confession together, in his words, not yours, and have him speak it aloud to you while you listen. Then assign him one rule for 30 days. He speaks it out loud every morning before he brings God a single request. Identity before petition, no exceptions. Check in weekly and ask him not whether he obeyed better, but whether the morning feels different yet. You've come a long way. You revealed the Father. You closed the contract. You retired the hireling. You establish the sun. The person in front of you wakes up most mornings knowing whose they are. They don't grovel for approval. They don't work to settle a debt. They rest, then they respond. So you're done, right? No. You're halfway. A son who never becomes a father is a son who stopped growing. The ark was never orphan to son. The ark is orphan to heir to father. The final movement is the one most discipleship never reaches, because most discipleship was aiming at obedience, and a well-behaved man can look finished while he is still barren. Sonship that doesn't reproduce isn't mature sonship. It's adolescence with good theology. Go and make disciples of all nations. Matthew 28:19. We have heard this verse as a recruitment slogan. Enroll students. Fill seats. Run the program. Get them through the curriculum. But look at what Jesus actually commands. He doesn't say make converts. He doesn't say make attenders. He says make disciples. And the only disciple Jesus ever made was a brother, a co-heir, a son sent the way the Son was sent. As the Father has sent me, even so I send you. John 20:21. The Great Commission is not an enrollment drive. It's a reproduction command. You are not building an audience around yourself. You are building sons who build sons. The family expands by family logic, generation begetting generation, not by the institution adding members. This is the whole point of Romans 8:29. For whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brothers. Romans 8:29. Read that again slowly. The destiny God set on you is not merely to be saved. It's to be conformed to the image of his Son, and Jesus is named here as the firstborn among many brothers. Firstborn implies more behind him. The Father was never after one son. He was after a household. Jesus is the prototype, you are the production run. And a son made in the image of the firstborn carries the firstborn's instinct, to bring more brothers home. If the goal is to look like Jesus, then the goal includes reproducing. Jesus reproduced. He took 12 men and poured himself into them until they could do what he did without him in the room. Then he left. On purpose. He told them his leaving was to their advantage. John 16:7. He did not build a movement that needed his physical presence to survive. He built sons, filled them with his Spirit, and sent them out from under his shadow. That is the model. That is the method. Now hear the warning, because this is where it goes wrong. There is a way to disciple people that produces the opposite of a father. It feels like ministry. It feels like fruitfulness. People stay close to you. They quote you. They text you before every decision. They can't pray without checking whether you'd approve. They feel safe because you are near. And you feel important because they need you. That is not fathering. That is dependency dressed as discipleship. And it is more common than you think because it is rewarding. A leader surrounded by people who can't move without him feels powerful. He feels needed. He mistakes the crowd's dependence for his own fruitfulness. But dependence is not discipleship. A man can gather 100 people who lean on him and have made 0 sons. He has built a fan base. He has cultivated followers who serve his ministry and never grow up. And the longer it goes, the harder it is to undo, because now their identity is wrapped around him instead of around the Father. This is the elder brother all over again, only now you've made one. Remember him, the son in Luke 15, who served his father for years and never once knew he was an heir. He was loyal. He was reliable. He never left the property. And he was furious, because he had spent his whole life as a slave in his father's house and didn't know the inheritance was already his. These many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed a commandment of yours. Luke 15:29. That is a man who labored a lifetime and never received his sonship. If your discipleship produces people who are devoted to you but have never come into their own inheritance, devoted, dependable, and quietly enslaved, you have raised elder brothers. Good behavior, bad news. Here is the hard line. Raise people to need you forever, and you didn't raise sons. You made orphans with a leader attached. Sit with that. The orphan's wound is I have no one. When you make yourself the indispensable one, the source they cannot function without, you have not healed the orphan. You've just become the thing he attaches to in place of the Father. You've moved his dependency from God to you. You feel like a father. You are functioning like an idol. A real father gives his children a name, a nature, and an inheritance, and then he releases them to live as adults. He does not keep them small to keep them close. The measure of a father is not how many people orbit him. It's how many people have left his orbit, able to do what he does. Which means every healthy discipleship relationship is aiming at its own obsolescence. Let that reframe everything. You are not succeeding when they depend on you. You are succeeding when they don't have to anymore. The win is the day they can father someone else without calling you first. You worked yourself out of a job, and that is the job. A father who can't be left is a father who failed to finish. Paul understood this exactly. Listen to him, hand the work forward. The things which you have heard from me among many witnesses, commit the same to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. 2 Timothy 2:2. Count the generations in that one verse. Paul teaches Timothy. Timothy entrusts faithful men. Those men teach others also. That's 4 generations in a single sentence. Paul, Timothy, faithful men, others, and Paul is in prison about to die. He is not anxious. He is not clinging. He is not trying to keep Timothy tethered to him. He is pushing the inheritance another generation downstream and trusting it to reproduce without him. Paul didn't build a Paul-shaped empire. He built fathers and let them go. And he called himself exactly that. For though you have 10,000 tutors in Christ, yet not many fathers. 1 Corinthians 4:15. Paul knew the difference between a tutor and a father. A tutor manages you for a season and hands you back. A father gives you his nature and writes you into the will. There is no shortage of tutors in the church, people who will run you through a program and grade your progress. What's rare is the father who reproduces himself. Paul was after the rare thing. So should you be. Notice the verb, commit. Entrust. Hand over. Paul deliberately deposits the gospel into other men, the way a father writes his children into the will. He's not protecting his position. He's not guarding his uniqueness. He gives away the very thing that makes him valuable, because that's what fathers do. They transfer. The orphan hoards because he's afraid there won't be enough. The father gives away the store because the inheritance is the father's and it never runs dry. So how do you actually do this? How do you disciple toward reproduction instead of dependence? You start at the beginning. You don't bolt reproduction on at the end like an advanced module. You build it in from day one. From the first conversations, disciple them toward discipline. Plant the expectation early that what they receive, they will give. Let them know from the start that they are not a destination, they are a link. The father is not filling a cul-de-sac. He's laying pipe. And ask the question early. Ask it often. Who will you do this with next? Ask it before they feel ready. Ask it when they protest that they have nothing to give. That protest is usually the orphan or the hireling talking. I don't have enough, I haven't earned the right. A son doesn't disciple out of mastery. He disciples out of belonging. He doesn't wait until he has it all together. He gives from the inheritance he already has, the same way a slightly older brother shows a younger one the ropes. You're not asking them to be the expert. You're asking them to be a brother. When you ask who's next early, you change what kind of person you're forming. A disciple who knows from the start that he will reproduce learns differently. He doesn't just absorb, he absorbs to transmit. He pays attention to how you father him because he knows he'll be doing it soon. He becomes a father in training, not a permanent recipient. A son you raised to need you forever was never fully raised. Watch for the moments to push them out. When they're carrying their own walk. When the Spirit is leading them and not just you. When they start noticing the orphan, the slave, and the hireling in the people around them, and feeling the pull to go after them. That pull is the firstborn's nature waking up in them. Don't smother it to keep them near. Bless it, name it, release it, and then do the hardest thing a leader ever does. Let them leave. Let them lead something you don't control. Let them disciple in a way that doesn't look exactly like yours. Let them have spiritual children who will never know your name, grandchildren you'll meet in glory and not before. Resist the urge to stay central. Resist the quiet pleasure of being needed. Decrease so the family can increase. Because here is what you're really building. Not a following, not a platform, not a room full of people who admire you. You're building a line, a succession of sons who became fathers, each one carrying the father's heart another generation down, until people you will never meet are resting in their belovedness, because someone fathered the one who fathered the one you fathered. That's the loop. That's the kingdom expanding by family logic. Reveal the father, and one day they reveal him to someone else. Establish the son, and one day they establish another. The movement completes when the disciple becomes the discipler, and the son you raised stands over someone else and starts again at movement 1. You are not the end of the line. You're a link in a chain the father started before you and will finish after you. So raise them to leave. Send them like the Father sent the Son. And measure your fruit not by how many gather around you, but by how many are out there, somewhere you can't see, making sons of their own. The punchline: you haven't finished disciplining a son until he can father someone else without you. Servant or son, look at the people you lead. Are they growing more dependent on you over time, or more able to reproduce what you gave them? And which of those have you secretly been calling fruit? The son's confession: I am not an orphan, and I will not make orphans. I received freely, so I give freely. The Father made me a son to make me a father, and what was poured into me, I pour into others. Until brothers I'll never meet are resting in his love. For the disciple maker, within the first month with anyone you're forming, ask them out loud. Who will you do this with next? Write down the name they land on, put it in front of them again every few weeks, and start preparing them to begin, long before they feel ready. You cannot fix what you cannot name. So before you can move a person from servant to son, you have to learn to hear which one is talking. And here is the good news for the disciple maker. People tell you constantly. Not in a survey. In their reflexes. In the questions they ask, the way they read, the way they serve, the way they break. The house a person lives in leaks out of their mouth. Most disciple makers never learn to listen for it. They listen for behavior. Is he showing up? Is he serving? Is he reading his Bible? And behavior is the worst diagnostic there is, because a slave and a son can do all the same things. The elder brother and the prodigal both ended up at the same feast. One arrived home from a pig pen. One refused to come in from the field. You'd never have guessed the difference by their attendance record. You have to listen deeper than behavior. You have to listen for the engine underneath it. So this chapter is a field guide, a set of fast diagnostics you can run in real time, in an ordinary conversation, that tell you which consciousness is driving: orphan, slave, hireling, or son. Learn these, and you'll stop being fooled by good behavior. You'll hear the house. 6 diagnostics for reading the house. Run these like a checklist. None of them is about how much a person does. Every one of them is about why. A servant asks, what should I do? A son asks, who am I? Listen to the questions people bring you. The servant is forever asking for the next task, the next standard, the next box to check, because his standing depends on his doing. The son's deepest question has already moved underneath the doing, to identity. When a person's questions shift from what does God want from me to who does God say I am, you are watching a slave become a son in real time. A servant fears the master's displeasure. A son rests in the Father's delight. Ask a person what they think God feels about them on an ordinary Tuesday. The servant scans for a frown. He assumes God is mildly annoyed, waiting to be impressed. The son assumes he is already loved and gets to live from that. Same God, 2 completely different faces, imagined over the same throne. A servant serves to get, a son serves because he already got. This is the hardest one to see, because the actions look identical. Both serve, but watch the direction the effort flows. The servant's work flows toward God, trying to secure something not yet his. The son's work flows out of God, spending something already given. One is making a payment. The other is writing a thank you note. An orphan competes and hoards, a son shares freely. Put a person near someone else's blessing and watch. The orphan, the one who believes he is on his own, with nothing guaranteed, tightens. Another man's win feels like his loss. He compares, he keeps score, he protects his turf. The son, who knows the Father's estate is bottomless, can celebrate what he didn't get and give away what he has, because scarcity was never the truth of his house. A slave reads the Bible to stay safe. A son reads it to know the Father. Ask why a person opens the Word. The slave reads to avoid getting it wrong, to keep the rules straight, to stay out of trouble, to manage the wrath he assumes is hovering. He reads it like a contract he's afraid of breaching. The son reads it like a letter from someone who loves him. Same book. One reads it to survive it. One reads it to meet someone in it. A hireling burns out, a son overflows. Give it enough time, and the engine reveals itself in the exhaust. The hireling works for wages, and wages run out. So eventually he does too, depleted, resentful, quietly wondering when the pay will match the effort. The son works from a fullness he keeps receiving, so his service tends to overflow rather than drain. When you see chronic, bitter burnout in a faithful person, you are almost never looking at a son who needs rest. You are looking at a hireling who needs an inheritance. 6 diagnostics. Notice that not one of them measures output. Every one of them exposes the motive underneath the output, survival, fear, wages, or love. That is the whole point. You are not auditing performance. You are listening for which house the performance comes from. And once you've heard it, you don't shame it. You name it, and you walk the person back to the movement they skipped. Match the symptom to the missing movement. Here is what makes these diagnostics more than clever observations. Each one points to a specific repair. A symptom is just a clue about which movement didn't land. So when you hear the house, you already know where to take them. Hear the orphan competing, hoarding, self-sourcing, terrified to share, and you take him back to movement 1. Reveal the father. He doesn't believe he belongs to anyone, so of course he's clutching. He needs a father before he needs a lecture on generosity. Hear the slave, fearful, hiding after failure, reading scripture to stay out of trouble, and you take him back to movement 2. Close the contract. He's still working off a debt that Christ already marked paid in full. He needs to hear it is finished until the ledger closes. Hear the hireling, transactional, burning out, asking what he gets for all this, and you take him back to movement 3. Leave the wage behind. He's still working for God instead of from God. He needs the wage retired before he collapses under it. Hear a man who's done all the right things for years and still doesn't rest, still asks what should I do instead of who am I, and you take him back to movement 4. Establish the son. He has the behavior and not the identity. He is the elder brother, and he needs to hear all that is mine is yours, Luke 15:31, until it becomes the floor he stands on. You don't have to guess. The symptom names the missing movement. Diagnose the house, then take the person home to the room they never entered. Now hear the hardest case. There is one more diagnosis you have to be able to make, and it's the one careful discipleship is most likely to miss. A man can pass every behavioral test and still be a slave. He shows up, he serves, he gives, he leads, he reads his Bible daily. By every metric you'd put on a discipleship report card, he's the success story. And the whole time, his engine is fear, and his self-understanding is servant. Listen to him for 2 minutes about his standing with God, and you'll hear it. But he answered his father, Behold, these many years I served you, and I never disobeyed a commandment of yours. Luke 15:29. That is the elder brother, and that is a flawless service record narrated by a man who never knew he was an heir. These many years I served you. He's standing in his father's house, surrounded by his father's wealth, and he describes his life with the vocabulary of a hired hand. He had the address. He never moved in. His good behavior was his bad news, because it had quietly convinced everyone, including him, that he was fine. That man will sit in your group for a decade if you only ever check his behavior. You will praise him, you will lean on him, and you will never set him free, because you mistook his obedience for his sonship. So run the diagnostics on your best people, not just your strugglers. The struggler often knows he's lost. The elder brother has no idea. He's the one who most needs you to hear the house and how he talks. Handling relapse. Here is the last thing you need, and it will save you a great deal of panic. Son, slide back. A person can genuinely receive the spirit of sonship, walk in it for months, resting, overflowing, running toward the Father instead of away, and then hit a hard week and start talking like a slave again. A diagnosis comes back. A marriage strains. A failure piles on a failure. And under pressure, the old language returns. I must have done something wrong. I need to clean myself up before I pray. God's probably pulled back. Do not read that as proof the work didn't take. Read it as exactly what it is. A son, under load, reaching for an old tongue he hasn't fully forgotten yet. Pressure doesn't reveal that a son was a slave all along. Pressure reveals which movement he reaches past when he's scared. That's diagnostic gold, not failure. So when you hear it, do 3 things in order. Normalize it. Tell him plainly, this is what happens. The flesh remembers the slave's mother tongue, and stress brings it back to the surface. Sliding into servant thinking under pressure is not a sign you were never a son. It is a sign you are a son who got scared. Take the shame off the relapse immediately, because shame only deepens the slave reflex. Name it. Say out loud which house he just slipped into. Hear what you just said. That was a slave's sentence. You're talking like the debt's back on you. You can't fix what you can't name, and most people genuinely don't notice the shift. Naming it gives him a handle on something that was running him from underneath. Walk him back through the movement he dropped. The relapse always points to a room. If he's hiding in fear, take him back through the closed contract. It is finished. If he's grinding for approval again, retire the wage one more time. If he's forgotten who he is, re-establish the son. You are not teaching him something new. You are walking him home to a room he already knows, until the new reflex outlasts the old one. Relapse is not the failure of the method. Working a person back through the movement is the method. Sonship is not a single event you secure once and shelve. It's a default you keep restoring, in yourself and in everyone you form, until son is the language that rises before the fear can speak. Learn to hear the house in how they talk. Then walk them home. The punchline: you can't fix what you can't name, so learn to hear the house in how a person talks, then walk them back through the one movement they dropped. Servant or son? When you talk about your own walk with God, do you describe what you do for him, or who you are to him, and which one would you reach for first under pressure? The son's confession: I am a son, not a slave, even on my worst week. When fear speaks the old language, I will not believe it. I will name it, and I will turn back toward my Father. My standing does not slide when I do. For the disciple maker, spend one conversation only listening, no fixing. Ask the person you're forming to describe their relationship with God. Then run the 6 diagnostics silently as they talk. Catch one servant sentence and gently name it out loud. Did you hear that? That was a slave talking. Then tell them which house it came from and which movement you're going to walk back through together, and do it right there before the conversation ends. Picture the house you are building. Not the building. The house. The living thing you are forming, one person at a time, the family that will outlast you. Walk through it in your mind. Look at the people in it. Now answer one question, and answer it honestly, because everything in this book has been pointing here. Did you build a staff, or did you raise a family? There is a way to tell, and it has nothing to do with how busy the place is. A house full of servants is busy. It hums. The roads are full, the gaps get covered, the work gets done, and from the road it looks like health. But a house full of servants has a ceiling, and the ceiling is you. Everything runs through the master. The servants execute, they do not originate. They wait to be told. They do good work and they do it on command, and the day the master is gone, the work stops, because the work was never theirs. It was his, and they were renting their place in it. A house full of sons does not have that ceiling. A son does not wait to be told, because a son already knows the Father's heart, and a person who knows the Father's heart does not need a command for every move. He acts the way his Father would act, in the Father's absence, without being asked, because the Father's heart is now his own. That is the difference between an instruction and an inheritance. You can give a servant 100 instructions, and he will execute 100 tasks and stop at the 101st, because you never said. You give a son the heart, and the heart never stops generating the next right thing on its own. One waits for orders. The other carries the Father. That is the whole difference, and it is the difference between a ministry and a family. A ministry of servants can be large and still be fragile, because it depends on the one at the center. A family of sons is something else. It does not depend on you. It reproduces you. The sons grow up, and grown sons do not wait to be told. They already carry the Father's heart, so they do the Father's work on their own initiative, in rooms you will never enter, with people you will never meet. You did not build reach. You built reproduction. And reproduction is the only thing that outlives the one who started it. Hear how the writer of Hebrews describes what the cross was actually for. For it became him, for whom are all things, and through whom are all things, in bringing many sons to glory, to make the author of their salvation perfect through sufferings. For both he who sanctifies and those who are sanctified are all from one, for which cause he is not ashamed to call them brothers. Hebrews 2:10-11. Sit in that, bringing many sons to glory, not recruiting servants for a task, not staffing an operation. The eternal aim, the purpose clause behind the suffering of Christ, is a family being carried all the way home. And then the line that should undo you: he is not ashamed to call them brothers. The Son of God, the radiance of the Father's glory, looks at the people he died for, at you, at the ones you are forming, at the elder brothers still doing math on a goat, and he is not embarrassed to claim them. He does not call them my workforce. He does not call them my volunteers. He calls them brothers, and he says it without flinching. If that is the family Jesus is not ashamed to claim, then a ministry that produces something less than sons is producing something less than what he bled for. Now go up one level, to the place where this whole vision is rooted, because the family did not start with us. For this cause I bow my knees to the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, from whom every family in heaven and on earth is named. Ephesians 3:14-15. Every family, in heaven and on earth. named from the Father. Read it slowly, because Paul is telling you where fatherhood comes from. He is saying that there is one Father at the source of everything, and every other father, every other family, every household and lineage and name that has ever existed is a copy that takes its name from him. Fatherhood is not a human invention that we project onto God. It is the other way around. God is the original. We are the echo. Earthly families are named after the heavenly one, not the heavenly one after ours. And here is why that matters for the house you are building. If God is the Father from whom every family is named, then the deepest pattern in the universe is not organization. It is not management. It is not master and servant. It is father and son reproducing. That is the grain of reality. That is what everything is bent toward. So when you raise sons who become fathers who raise sons, you are not running a clever discipleship program. You are working with the grain of the universe. You are doing the one thing existence was built to do. And when you run a household of hirelings instead, you are working against that grain, and you will feel the friction forever, because you are trying to manufacture by management what was only ever going to come by family. This is the whole arc of this book, landing. Orphan to heir to father. You met the orphan first, the one who says I'm on my own, who self-sources everything because he has no father to draw from. You met the slave, who works to avoid wrath, and the hireling who works for wages, and you learned that both of them can serve your house for years and look exactly like a son from the outside. You learned that the elder brother was not a failure of discipleship, but a success of it. A man who served faithfully and never once knew he was an heir, standing on an estate, calling himself a hired hand. And you learned the cure was never more chores. It was revelation. Reveal the Father. Close the contract. Leave the wage behind. Establish the Son. And then, the last movement, the one this whole chapter is for, reproduce the Father. Because a son who never becomes a father is not yet finished. He is real. He is secure. He is genuinely a son. But he is a son who has only learned to receive, and the family was never meant to end with him. Sonship that does not reproduce is sonship that stopped halfway. The inheritance was given to be spent on others, and a son who hoards it, who stays warm at the Father's table and never carries the table to anyone else, has misunderstood what he was given. The Father did not raise you up to be the last in the line. He raised you up to start one. This is where so much good discipleship stalls. We get a person settled as a son, secure, resting, no longer earning. And we are so relieved to have gotten him out of the slave's fear that we let him stop there. We keep him a dependent. We make ourselves the permanent source. And without ever meaning to, we build a house full of grown sons who still act like children, still waiting for us, still drawing from us instead of from the Father directly. We confused being needed with making disciples. They are not the same. One builds your ministry. The other builds the kingdom. And the test of which one you are doing is simple and merciless. Can they do it without you? A father's whole aim is to become unnecessary in the way a child needs him and necessary forever in the way a family loves him. He raises the son to stand on his own, not alone, never alone, but standing, drawing from the same Father, carrying the same heart, able to do for others exactly what was done for him. The mark of a mature son is not how much he serves you. It is how many sons he is raising himself. You will know your work took the day the ones you formed are no longer coming to you to be fed, but coming alongside you to feed others. That is reproduction. That is a father. That is the goal. So let me put the invitation plainly, the way this book has tried to put everything. Stop running a household of hirelings. Start raising a house full of sons. Stop measuring your success by how busy the place is, and start measuring it by whether it would keep multiplying if you disappeared. Stop platforming the most frightened worker as the model disciple. Stop confusing reliable service with secure sonship. Stop being the ceiling. Reveal the Father so relentlessly, so patiently, so far down into a person's bones that they stop working to belong and start working from belonging. And then watch what a person does with that freedom, because what they do with it is go and give it away. This is not soft. Do not mistake any of it for soft. A house full of sons is the most formidable thing on earth, because you cannot manage it into submission and you cannot starve it out, because it does not run on fear, and it does not run on wages, and it does not depend on the one at the center. It runs on a Father who cannot be exhausted and an inheritance that cannot be spent, and it multiplies, and it keeps multiplying, long after the one who started it has gone home. That is the house. That is the family. That is what the suffering was for. Heaven was never recruiting servants. It was always raising sons. So go and do the same. Reveal the Father to the ones in front of you. Settle them as heirs. Then send them, not as staff you keep, but as sons you release, to go and be fathers to the next ones, so that the family the Father is not ashamed to claim keeps filling up, generation after generation, name after name, until the house is full. Bring many sons to glory. He is not ashamed of a single one of them. Neither should you be. The punchline: heaven was never recruiting servants, it was always raising sons. And your job is not to run a household of hirelings, but to raise a family that reproduces the Father long after you're gone. Servant or son, if you vanish tomorrow, would the work you built stop because it ran through you, or would it keep multiplying because the ones you formed are already fathers, raising sons of their own? The son's confession: I am a son of the Father from whom every family is named, and the Son is not ashamed to call me brother. I do not work to belong, I belong so I work. And because I have a Father, I can be one, so I will not hoard what I was given. I will reproduce it, and raise sons and fill the house. For the disciple maker, take one person you have settled as a son and do the hardest, most fatherly thing left to do. Hand them someone of their own. Point them to a person who is still an orphan or a slave or a hireling, and say, now you go reveal the Father to them, the way it was revealed to you. Then step back far enough that they have to draw from God and not from you. Stay close enough to cheer, far enough to make room. That is how a son becomes a father, and that is the only way the house ever fills.